Thought I'd better start off by telling you where I'm from, and this is where I'm from. I'm from New Zealand, which is approximately 12 hours by plane from here. And I'm from a particular part of New Zealand called Hamilton, and Hamilton's famous for cows and milk. New Zealand's famous for rugby, All Blacks. So we have to do that. So, I always like people to leave with one thing that they've learned. And this is kia ora, which means hello in Māori. So, say kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
It's not very good. At the end of the session, I'm going to ask you that, and if you can't say it properly, you will come to the front and we will have an individual lesson with you. Do the haka. So, what I'm going to talk about is e-learning capability, and the first thing that we've got to agree on is what do we mean by e-learning. If I asked you right now what you thought e-learning was, what would your response be? So what would you say? E-learning is? Online. E-learning is?
Independent learning.
Independent learning. E-learning is? Flexible. Flexible. Mobile. Online. So when we actually talk about e-learning, we're starting to think about this. Technology is going to save all our educational problems. And we're saying we've got all these people and we want to be flexible and they can't come to work and they can't be here and we've got to be more... And if we do all this flexibility and we do all mobile, technology will save everything. The problem is, if we don't understand what e-learning is, we can't fix any problem. And when I just asked you what e-learning is, I got a whole lot of responses. If I asked you, the second question is, what devices do you use for e-learning? What would you say? What would you say? What device would you use in e-learning? What device? Computer? Someone out there? Internet? Smartphones? Automatically I've got a problem. When I want to investigate the e-learning capability of this institution, am I talking about online learning using smartphones? Am I talking about web-based learning using computers? Am I talking about web-enabled learning in a lecture theatre? What am I talking about? If I can't identify what I am talking about, I cannot measure it. If I cannot measure it, I cannot improve. We automatically have a problem with e-learning because we get these ideas that e-learning is everything to everyone and everyone has different functions about it and we have real issues. But what I want you to think about is really, can we identify those key features that we can measure? What can we measure? And the first thing we can measure is, can people connect? Can I connect to the system? Can my students in a remote village connect to my system? Can they connect to it in an urban area? How do these people connect? Can I get them to connect? As soon as I've identified that I need to measure connection, I have got a research question, I've got an impact question, I've got something that I can evaluate the impact of that. Then I've got the content. As soon as I've identified how people connect to my systems, I can then decide what content I'm going to deliver to that system. It's all right me having a wonderful vision of e-learning and video conferencing and videos, and the person actually in the middle of a village has got limited internet access, has got a computer, and they really want things by CD, so they can play this by CD and interact with CD because that's the connection, it is no use me developing content based on the internet because it is going to fail. My e-learning initiative is going to fail. If I can't identify what my audience connection is, the content doesn't matter. I've got to marry the connection and the content together. As soon as I've measured the connection and the content, I can then identify what capabilities that person must have to actually understand the material and what capabilities the teacher needs or the lecturer needs to deliver in that medium. By putting all those three things together, I can now measure e-capability. I have been very systematic about it. I've measured e-capability. And these things are what we call the 3 C's. Context are those factors that influence perceptions of ICT-enabled environments. That is connections. And when I mean perceptions, how many people have tried a computer program and it doesn't work and you just turned right off it? We all done that? Tried something, logged in, didn't work, oh, that's useless, won't go back there, even though the program could be the most brilliant program in the world. That robustness, that person's perception of that connection is really, really important. If the connection doesn't work first up, they're really reluctant to try it again. So that context is all around those connections. The content is those factors, that uniqueness of the activities that shape direction and focus. So a person's connection will dictate the content that I'm going to give them, which will dictate the engagement. There is a different form of engagement on a CD than online. There is social groups online, on CD it's self-motivated. How do I provide feedback on a CD that tries to mimic this social engagement? Because it's really important, so they start to think about that. And the capability of those factors building the competence and confidence levels. I'm just going to turn this on, otherwise I'll run out. And those are what we call, those together we've called the 3 C's. And if you have a look at all writings on distance education, you'll hear them call about the 3 pillars of distance learning, and they're actually these, and you just transfer them straight to e-learning. There is no difference. But it's all right knowing the factors. It's actually all right knowing the factors, but how do we apply them? So, what we have to do when we actually start an e-learning project, is anyone working on an e-learning project at the moment? They're doing an e-learning project? Everyone's involved in one. First thing I actually do when you start an e-learning project is actually look at the connectivity. Am I developing this for mobile devices? If I am, there's a thing about it, and you've got to ask the questions. First question is always around context. First question is always around context. Second question is all around content. As soon as I decided how people are going to connect, I can design the content. The trick is, economically, to actually design the content to be available on multiple platforms. So if I design, have you heard of SCORM? Shareable Content Object Resource Models. I can get that model, I can put it online and you can engage with it online. I can put it on CD, you can engage with it on CD. If I have a smart server, it will actually look at it on a mobile device. So I create the content once and it connects many times. And then I look at capability. The biggest problem with learning with e-learning is students feel very anxious. They're extremely anxious about their environment. They feel that they can't do things. So you've got to be really upfront and say, yes, it is going to be a challenge, but if you do this, this and this, you've got to learn all the techniques you'll learn in this course, and the course will do no more than those things you've established. So they come into the course and they say, if I learn A, B and C, I'll be able to do the course. Good. I know A, B, and I'll get my child to teach me how to do C. I'll get my friend to do it. But as soon as they're confident, they're away. If you then introduce D, they'll just go, oh no, this is beyond me, it's too tricky. So you've got to be very upfront. Everything must be upfront in the learner's minds. But that's really good to have these things, but it doesn't actually improve my capability. All it does is make me think of how I should design. Doesn't improve capability at all. Capability only comes when we can say the impact on student learning, it's done it in the manner I've intended it to. It's efficient, that means it's cost effective, and the learners have engaged in the activities, developing the activities, and everything is. And it's replicable. These events are not one-off. The cost of developing e-learning events, as you know, is extremely, extremely high. Because they're extremely high, what you have to do is make sure that the event is used more than once and as many times as possible, which gives you economies of scale. So, what we have to do is we've got 3 E's that actually go with the 3. When I say a person is connected, I've enabled that connection. So, my idea is that initiatives are measured. So I said everyone will be able to connect to a CD because that's what I've developed. Yes, I've checked all my students and everyone had a computer. I've enabled that. I've measured it. Good. Second part is engaged, which is with the content. The content I have has engaged the students. How do I measure that engagement? I measure that engagement by their understanding of the content. So the formative assessments I've set, the summative assessments I've set, the people have learnt it. I can measure that. So the content that I delivered is measurable because it's engaged the students. And they're empowered. Once I talk about capability, I talk about empowerment. How do I know they've empowered? Because they've completed the course. E-learning without measurement doesn't give capability at all. You must measure effectiveness. If you don't measure effectiveness, you're not improving capability. That's all around improving capability. And these things we call the 3 E's. So when I talk about enabled, they're engaged, they're empowered. What I've just done is taken you on a little bit of a journey. And I hope what I've done is started the journey with awareness. You're now going to reflect upon the existing capability to use ICT. That's what you're going to be reflecting upon. Hopefully, you're going to take action on those reflections to increase your confidence, and you're going to accomplish something, and you're going to measure that accomplishment. We call these the 3 A's. From awareness to accomplishment. When I put those together, I have what we call the ACE model. There are 3 A's, 3 C's, 3 E's. This is called the ACE framework. And what you can see is, I start with awareness of an issue. The awareness is, I've got to develop this course. I then systematically develop that course using the 3 pillars: context, content, and capability. As soon as I've done that, I then automatically, as part of the design process, have my measurements. tools in place, and when the event has been finished, I've accomplished something. Accomplishment is not necessarily success. Accomplishment could be that you've learnt from it and it comes back into the awareness, so when you take the action. So it is a cyclical thing. And this cyclical thing we call the RAM model. The RAM model is where you reflect on your strengths and weaknesses in relation to your integration of ICT. So you start to reflect on it. That reflection generates action. That action generates measurement. So that's called the reflection, action, measurement cycle. We call it the RAM model. And this is what it looks like. Stop me if you want any, if there's any questions you want to ask, please feel free to jump in and ask. So, problem with reflection, there's a major issue with the reflection. Everyone talks about reflective practice. Major problem is, when I reflect, I only reflect on the knowledge I've got. If the knowledge I have currently is flawed, doesn't matter how many times I reflect, if the knowledge I have is limited, I'm not going to improve. So you go, well, how do I actually, what do I reflect on then? Well, you reflect on standards. You benchmark your activities against accepted standard. So in evaluating an individual's ICT capability, you have identified a clear set of measurable indicators that you can measure yourself against. So you can say, this is what I'm doing, this is what every other institution in the world's doing. How do I match up? Do I match up here, here? By reflecting on that and identifying the gaps, you move forward. Let me tell you, right now, every institution in the world, and this is a generalised statement, every teacher in the world right now delivers really well. They're trained to deliver content. They're designed to deliver content. If you measured teachers around the world, you would find that they all deliver content well. The problem is they don't measure the impact of their delivery on students. So we get all these wonderful people delivering all the content and they say our job is done, and they walk away. People go to the next level and the next level goes, what did you learn? You haven't learnt anything here. Look, I've got a reteacher. I'll deliver you all my content, and they go back. Because they haven't actually measured the impact. They haven't done things about the impact. So we've got to really start thinking about that. Measuring the impact is really crucial. The problem is with standards though, problem with standards is that they're used as benchmarking tools. And they used as, oh, we're better than you because look at what we do, and we're better than you because we do this. What you have to do, though, is there are so many standards in the world, there are hundreds of them. What you have to do is identify those key features that meet your requirements, and from those key features, identify how you're going to improve. So, these are called self-review frameworks. And what I'm going to do, hopefully, is I might show you one. No. Might take a while to come up. So, this is a self-review framework. This has been developed in New Zealand. It's called the EMM model, which is called the e-maturity model. So, let's take a delivery one. So, this just says, reviews of course materials are conducted regularly. I mean, you can answer this yourself. You can actually say, I've developed a course, do I or don't I review the material regularly? Fully. Yes, I agree that I do that all the time. If you notice what happens on the left, you get a little colour. And at the top, you get an indicator, which is at the moment, little light blue. It's light blue at the moment because you haven't completed them all. And if I went through and completed them all at the same event, fully, you see the indicators change the colour. Look at what it's asking you to do though. What it's asking you to do is just reflect on, are your students and staff provided with information on how reviews have been and will be used to modify and improve e-learning? So what does that mean? Lots of times we go out and we do the student surveys, student satisfaction surveys. Yes? All seen those? End of the term, boom, complete these for me. I've got them all. Everyone tells me I'm doing really well and away you go. How can you prove that you have used those student satisfaction surveys to actually improve the course? Someone says, oh, I didn't really like Module 1. Can you prove to anyone that you've used the student satisfaction survey, which indicated Module 1 was not really well done, and that you've improved the course? Where in your institution does this occur? Generally doesn't occur. You just take the student satisfaction surveys and go, oh, we're doing really, really well. In actual fact, you're not doing really well because you haven't used the information. Not only haven't you used the information, you haven't told the students how you're going to use the information, because the students are an integral part of your learning process. So we can go in through here, students and staff, and we can actually start answering these questions. So, what starts to happen is we get this, what they call a pictorial carpet. And you start to fill in the questions of all the elements. And as you fill in the questions of all the elements, you get different colours. So as you go, if we do E3, for example, let's do O1. What's above that? S6. So if I do S6, do number 1. You can see every time I actually do the thing, it gives me what we call a pictorial carpet. If you notice by this, what then happens is anything that I've got white, I go, oh, my e-learning capability is very weak in here. I can then go to O1 and I can say, oh, what is it about this, my institution, that we're really not doing well? And it's all in O1 is our problem. And O1 tells me these are my issues. Resources for e-learning indicators have been allocated. Resources for designated times during the budget target. E-learning initiatives are formally linked. And it just goes through and tells me what I've done. As an institution, I can then decide what to do or what not to do, because we've got limited funds. We have got limited funds to do things with. We decide which of these indicators are really the most important indicators for us. We invest our time and resources in those indicators, and then we can get those coming in. This e-learning self-reflective framework is based upon set standards that are agreed that to be a mature organisation, you will meet these standards. Now, what it doesn't mean is you've got to meet them all. What it means is your institution decides what you're going to focus upon. And you focus upon that really well, and if it's delivery, if it's student care, if it's pastoral care, away you go. In our institution, what we've done is divided it up and actually said, well, it's not an organisational thing. There are some parts about it that are organisational, the funding. But in general, the student support services will take all those features that are student support services and work on those, and the teachers will do that. So it becomes just integrated in what you do. So self-review frameworks just become integrated in your part. If you want to search for this spreadsheet and all the information related to the model is available, freely available on EMM. If you search for the e-maturity model, you'll find these and you can download all of this material. So, if you saw that self-reflective framework though, what it was though, so it identifies the categories, delivery, management, finances. So it identifies categories, it identifies the dimensions, and then it identifies the practices. The actual practices that you undertake. It is meant to be a challenging process. You are meant to reflect on it. If you've noticed what it's already done, it's taken that reflective process and added that extra dimension that's really important when you want to improve e-capability. Without that extra dimension, you're working in isolation, you're working on your own, you will continually have a cycle that doesn't actually improve. What you've got to do is try and improve it systematically. And you don't use it as a benchmarking tool, you use it as a tool. So, this is the e-learning framework which I've just shown, and you get a pictorial carpet similar to this. So, now, I showed you that, and I've said, you've got to have this pictorial carpet and you've got to reflect on things. And then you've got to reflect, act, measure, and then you've got this ACE framework that you come up with, ACE model. So what we've done is, if you have a look at that, it looks quite messy, but in actual fact it should look like this. And this is what we call the ACE management framework. So we want people to reflect, we want people to use standards, but the standards that you reflect upon, that you should really be reflecting upon and have a clear sense about it, is it's all around the connection, the context. It's all around the content, it's all around the capability. If I can then identify those key elements that I need to reflect on and measure, on content, on connection, I am going to improve my e-learning capability. And the biggest issue for any institution is to measure that e-learning capability. And that's called accomplishment. So, I'm going to give you an example. No, is there any questions on that, first of all? No? No? I'm going to give you an example. Have you seen these? These are one-dimensional codes. I mean, we've done this. And we know that sometimes we can stack them like they do in airports and you get this thing. But if you notice, data is still presented in a horizontal direction. I might be talking to the converted here, but QR codes or quick response codes have lots more data, and you can read them in horizontal and vertical. So it takes a lot more data. Why do we want to use QR codes in education? It's a key question, isn't it? First thing is I've identified that we want to use QR codes, and then this next question is, it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? It's just a new technology. Why do we want to use it in education? You've got to have a reason for using QR codes. I mean, you just say, oh, this is wonderful. So what we actually then went to is, when students are on the bus and they're reading their book, and we hand out workbooks, and there's part of that book that says you've got to look at this video, or it's got a little answer. By using their smartphone, they're able to just look at the QR code. Oh, that's what the answer to that is. Oh, right. But it actually enhances the book. So the QR codes will act as an enhancement then to lots of material, especially with smart devices. The other thing that we can use them for is in a particular workshop, and I am using a drill, and I've got a QR code there that's got level 1. I snap the QR code at level 1 and it says, oh, you must do A, B, C, D, E, shows me what I'm supposed to do, and I can then do it. So the QR codes could be on the drill and do that. So there are uses for QR codes, and there are uses especially when we start enabling smart devices. There are uses for them, especially in libraries, museums. They're all used. The QR codes are used extensively in libraries and museums. So, first thing I did then was go through this. I've got to check the connection. How am I going to get these people to connect to the QR codes? Where am I going to store all this? What am I going to do? And the first thing I did was discovered the mobile learning engine. I'm going to explain why this mobile learning engine is important to me in a minute. But what this allowed me to do is give me a development platform that I could develop material that QR codes could read. And the QR code would connect to this mobile learning engine. So, next part is the content. What sort of content did I want to do? And we came with this concept of scapes. You hear people talk about landscape, seascape. We can start talking about educational scapes. So I'm an architectural student. I go around the town. QR codes are embedded in the building, tells me what's underneath that, gives me a whole lot of videos around it. It will create this learning scape for me. Just like posters on the walls in classrooms. Gives me ability to do that. This will give me the ability to do that. Then I look at capability. What capability do these people have? So I'm going to introduce these QR codes. I'm going to introduce this mobile engine. I'm going to talk about concept of scapes. How are these people actually going to react when I actually launch this upon the world? The mobile learning engine is integrated directly within Moodle. We use Moodle as our learning management system. Students already know how to use Moodle. I'm just building a little bit on their existing capability. If you notice what I've done, I've addressed all 3 of those features, and what it has then done is given me some sort of idea that there is going to be some success. I can gauge that there will be some resistance, there always is to technology, but because I've systematically addressed all the issues, I'm hoping that resistance is going to be less than normal. And as you can see, I've just gone through that and used that framework. What I haven't done, but what we do is use the EMM model as an umbrella document that just tells us how we're going. Not specific initiatives, but the whole institutional initiative as part of that. So, just on this first part, For institutions and organisations to iteratively improve your e-learning maturity, you've got to systematically plan. Got to do it. You've got to get the right information from the right people at the right time, but most importantly, you've got to measure. You will not have success unless you can measure what you've achieved. And that doesn't mean you've got to constantly get these tick boxes and do all these things. It means that you have got a goal in mind, that all your students are going to connect to a CD and they're going to connect to this video or whatever it is, and you can walk back and say, look, we said we were going to deliver this course to 100 students. Those 100 students would get the CD at their home within 5 working days. Tick, they all did it. Well done, we've done that. We said that the content would engage them in this, that once they completed it, they would get this certificate. Yes, they got the certificate. Well done. Capability, we enrolled 100, we completed 95, we've done really well. Well done, so we've made an improvement. The student satisfactions that come in from it, we've collected the student satisfaction and, oh look, they've told us they didn't really like part A, we've changed part A, and now when we reissue it again next year, we've done all this, and let's do that measurement, and it's a constant group. It doesn't mean that you've got all these whiz-bang things around the world. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that you have systematically addressed your e-capability to deliver courses to learners. And in the end, when you think about it, the only reason we are using e-learning is to improve the learning opportunities for learners. And we can only do that if we're systematic about it. If you start looking at how we've traditionally assessed people, we come to the conclusion that, especially when we want open, flexible and networked environments, and we want people to freely learn and freely do all these things, being open and having all these flexibility and then saying, oh, well, we didn't really mean it, you've still got to come along and sit this exam, is rather a pointless exercise. So what we tried to do is actually make the assessment authentic to the student. So the student chooses the assessment, and as long as the assessment meets the standards we have set, that is okay. For example, standard we set in automotive is that you've got to be able to dismantle a brake cylinder. I don't care if you dismantle that brake cylinder in my workshop at work or in your place of employment, as long as I know that you have dismantled the brake. What we can do in New Zealand is we have what we call workplace assessors that go to the workplace and say, dismantle the brake of the car that they're working on. Oh yeah, tick, tick, done. And they've met it. So it's that flexibility. Or as we become more and more mobile, we can actually say, well, you just take an image of you dismantling the brake. So as long as they meet the standard, doesn't matter. What the timing doesn't matter. So again, it comes back to the standards almost, that we're starting to look at these assessment rubrics or assessment standards to be our guide rather than a set lot of questions. Confidence comes into, confidence comes into capability, and cost comes into context, because it's not just the connection, context, there's all those factors that actually start to come into it. So you fit them into the system. It's not a rigid rule. My example was just to show you how you can systematically approach it. The key is you are never right or wrong. This is the issue. You never are going to be right or wrong. What you've got to do though is be systematic. You can't go out like we've done in the past and go, oh, smartphones. No. One that I just saw recently was iPads. Everyone was the whole world was going to change because of iPads. All the curriculum was going to change. iPads were going to revolutionise everything. And they had iPedagogy. I mean, they had it all over the world. Yet, when you had a look at the figures, when we looked at the figures and we went, hang on a minute, Apple have only been 20% of the market, no matter where in the world or what they've done, they're only ever going to be 20%. What about the other 80% of the market? Didn't make sense for us to actually invest in iPad technology because it didn't do anything for us, because we're only targeting 20% of the market. So then you actually go, well, tablets, smartphone, device independence, video, what is it about the iPad that people are thinking about? And they're thinking about using the video. They're thinking about having this portability. They're thinking about smaller devices, thinking of lighter devices, thinking about easy access. All of those, yes, we agree that that's going to be it, but don't actually put it onto a device. Start thinking about the other things that come in with it. So we did, I went through that sort of model and went, 20%. Not really where I don't want to invest a lot of time in this. You know, it was nice to play around with a little tablet and flick around, do all that, but not really as a learning tool. But the concepts behind it, yes, I totally agree. The concepts behind it, yes, but not the device itself. When you start thinking about e-learning, you actually start thinking, and if people are going to invest all this money in e-learning, there's got to be a change. The investment is there because of a purpose. It's not there because we don't want things to happen. There is a purpose behind it. But we've got to ask ourselves, if this new change, how will this new change affect the way we think of curriculum and the design of our curriculums? So, I'm just going to start with a basic question. The question is to find X. So, those who are rather slow, like me, would just go, there you are, I found it. That is X. Those who are more mathematical would actually say, this is X. What I want you to think about, though, is how did we approach that problem? If we had a mathematical bent and we were really good scientists, and we were there in science, we would go, oh, that's X plus hypothesis, and you would start thinking in that mind shift. If you're in the arts and you're not sort of, maths is not your field, you go, what are they asking me? It's right in front of me. What is going on here? So we've got to actually have that. So, same then happens if I give you this. Does anyone here play music? At all? This is not a scale, but when you have a look at the scale, music, these written words and these black dots, when someone who does music, it actually means something to them. It means something. And even though it means something to them, when you listen to music, the instrument that you play that tune is totally different for everyone. So if I play the tune with a piano, it's slightly different than a saxophone, which is slightly different than a rock and roll guitar. So they're all different. So even though I've got the standard tune, the standards we want to do, the way that we interpret it, so interpretation is influenced by our cultural influences. We can still play the same standard, we can still play the same tune, but our cultural approaches, our history, our language will make us play that tune differently, but it will still be the tune. So then you ask yourself, and I want you to think about this because this becomes really important, and it will do at the end. So, the New Zealand government spends millions of dollars in ICT every year. They increase broadband, they buy computer labs for schools, they buy CDs, they provide professional development. They do all these things, and what they're actually saying is, why are they doing it? They're saying And the common call is we're going to meet the needs of 21st century. Whatever the 21st century is, our government and your government and every government are saying our population has to be competitive in this 21st century. We've got to give them the skills that are going to be competitive in the 21st century. What those skills are, no one's actually quite sure of. So they're actually going, oh, what are we doing? What are we investing this money in? And then they look back and said, well, we spent a lot of money. What did we actually get? And what they don't want to happen is that children sort of forget how to learn. Forget that learning is an integral process. So it's not just the libraries become an end. You know, they're still an integral part of something, and it's not kind of version of the web. And what we've found in our country and in other countries is when you actually look at it, when you actually start thinking about it, there are levels of internet use. And these levels of internet use goes from passive to engagement, from broadcast to facilitation. So at the very limited level, and we've all got this, and we work on multiple levels within our institution, we provide course outlines. Students go, download it, look at the course outline. Simple, not a problem. But we do have informational ones. We have supportive. Download or ring this number. So you can see, even as we go through it, we have these various levels of engagement to the very full level of engagement, where in actual fact the ICT or the technology itself is the dominant mode of delivery. So then we actually say, well, oh, okay, let's make it that everyone in our school should have a laptop. Let's make it that everyone in our school should have this, should have that, this iPhone. But what's actually happened? Go back one. No, I won't, I'll go here. The reason why New Zealand is of real particular concern to us is if you have a look at where we are, we're miles away from everywhere. To actually be competitive in the global environment, we've got to be smart. It costs us too much money to send our goods to other countries. It costs us too much money to get people to come to us. We've got to be smart. We've got to be smarter than anyone else. Otherwise, we're not economically viable. So, start to do that. But let's have a look at the impact. And we talked about the impact of. I did a research project in 2009. And in 2009 we went into the project and I did a whole series of stuff around it. And we started to realise that a lot of the money that we invested did not significantly increase the use of e-learning. So what we had in the past, 100 years ago, was this situation. We invested all this money in technology and we had told people to buy technology and buy laptops, and we actually have this situation. There is absolutely no difference to the way we teach and the way we learn than 100 years ago. If I'm a government official and I'm spending millions and millions of dollars and you're telling me you're doing the same thing that you did 100 years ago, I'm going to say something is wrong. This ain't working. Something is fundamentally wrong with the way we're approaching educational achievement. So, I want to come back to these perceptual instruments. And it's the way we've learned in the past and the way we've done that. And our perceptual instruments means that we've got some conceptions of teaching. We've got some conceptions of learning. And we've got conceptions of the curriculum. So what do we mean by conceptions of teaching? Well, the first conception is, I'm standing here, I'm going to tell you everything. You will sit there, take it all in, the lesson will be finished, you'll walk away, everything will be brilliant. So it's called the transmission model. What the transmission model is it used to be, 100 years ago, the lecturer used to have access to the libraries and the books, because books were very rare. They were able to read the books and then lecture from the books to you because there wasn't enough books to go around. But given that the information's everywhere right now, is this the right way? And actually the way we look at this then is you say, well, what is this model we're looking at? Is come along to me and I'll fill you up with all this knowledge. And when your tank is full, away you go. When you want some more, come back, plug in, and away you go. So this transmission of knowledge is pretty much a common standard, even in today's lecture rooms. You've just seen one right there. It's very common. And it still brings people, and it restricts them to place, and it restricts them to time, and it restricts them to this area. So transmission models of learning are based upon people gathering together to listen to the expert. If I said to you now then that 4 billion people in this region or around this region, from India, China, around this region, are actually uneducated, and the government's wish is to educate them all, to educate each one of these people and give them a good start to life, because that's what they want. How many buildings would you have to build? How many classrooms would you have to fit out? How many books would you have to buy? How many lecture theatres would you have to construct? How many chairs would you have to buy? It is beyond the means of countries to fulfil this fundamental right. It's beyond their means. So as soon as we've got this transmission model in our minds, we are committing an investment in an infrastructure that you've actually got to ask yourself, is this sustainable? Is it sustainable? And you can get vice chancellors saying, let's use the lecture theatres 24 hours a day, let's do all this, but it's still the same model, be more cost effective, but it's still the same model. So transmission models, are they what they want? Especially when we want 21st century learners. You've got to remember that. So then we say, well, the better way of learning is this, what we call facilitation. So the tutor recognises that the student's got some learning, recognises the books that are available as what they've got to teach with, not that I need this to broadcast, but you've got that, let me use that to explore the ideas, let me use that to engage you. The tutor becomes the facilitator, recognising limitations, recognising what the student has got, what the student brings, what they can bring, how they can both actually engage in learning. Facilitation models of learning are based on constructivism. And what you can then start thinking about is, in the e-learning world, what about all these open educational resources that are freely available, that we can use? Why do I have to buy these books? Why can't I just grab things from somewhere? Why can't I grab all these things? Is that going to make a difference? So what we've got to do is be able to recognise that the student's already doing stuff. And it says here, can't I just email you a link to my blog, what I did on my holidays. Why can't he just, why does he have to write the essay? He's already done it. The content is already there. Why is it not recognised as content? So we've got to change our conceptions of what is right and wrong. Recognising that students have already existing knowledge and that they can contribute that knowledge is actually an important factor. And then we've got the conceptions of learners. So in one conception, you've come along to me and I'm going to fill you up. And how do I know if you've got it right? You are going to repeat it to me in an exam. So you receive, you recall, you repeat. Well done, you've already passed, you've passed my course. However, in the 21st century, what we really want them to do is actually review material, reflect on that material, and where necessary, repurpose it to meet their needs. We want them to engage in the process of learning. What this means is that the student can then be a lifelong learner because they're not dependent on anyone force feeding them content. They can actually grab content, start thinking about the content, start engaging with the content, repurpose the content to meet their own needs. So one, we've got what we call reception and the other is engagement. 21st century learners, because there is just so much information available, just millions and millions of pages available, go to the internet and search for biology. Go to the internet and search for heart. You will find there's hundreds and hundreds of materials on the heart. And students will find that material on the heart. They will repurpose that material on the heart and they will submit it to you. Some will then say, aha, they will cheat when they do come to the exam. Common issue. Yes, oh, they'll just go to the internet and read that essay that was done there. Fundamentally, you've got to ask yourself the question, what's wrong with that? Because you've asked them a very simple task. Repeat. They're doing exactly what you've asked them, repeating something. So then they actually say, people actually say, well, children don't read anymore. They just flick through information on the web. You know, we get this a common problem in New Zealand right now. They're actually saying, oh, children don't read anymore. They just go to Google, they find the answer on Google, and away they go. They give you that answer, they don't read anymore. Fundamental question is, what question did you ask them? If the question you asked them allows them to answer it with one quick search on the internet, it ain't really a very good assessment, is it? You've got to ask them to engage with the content, find something meaningful from it, not tell you what 2 + 2 is. 2 + 2 is 4. No matter how many times you tell them, if it's a simple question and you get a simple answer, you will find them going onto the internet and finding that because you have not structured the assessment to challenge them to actually do something. So, what we actually say then, what we want people to be, is there is a natural association, acquiring skills, developing their skills, which is confident, and knowing that that ICT is beneficial to themselves. What we have got to do is get students and teachers competent in using technologies. We've got to get them confident in using it, and we've got to get them capable, which is knowledgeable about when to use it. And if you saw that little model I had before, it's from awareness to accomplishment, and it's going through this Bruner's curriculum spiral. So, how many people have done this? Gone to a degree, done your bachelor's degree, first year, pass year 1 assessments, Good. Step up. Oh, second year, passed year 2 assessments, good. Third year, passed year 3 assessments, good. Tick, here's your certificate, walk away with it. Yes? Unfortunately for you, when you walk away with that certificate, the knowledge that you learnt for those 3 years is no longer valid because new knowledge is occurring that you have forgotten in the first year. So you've got a piece of paper that actually says, I used to know something. What you used to know is actually of no relevance to me at all. What I need to know is that you can think. And if you ask industry at the moment, what do they want? What do they want their people? They want their people to contribute. They want their people to think. They want their people to be flexible, to be agile, to think on their feet, to do all these things. Does this curriculum as product do that? Maybe it does. However, what you've actually got to look at is really curriculum as a process. You move from awareness to understanding. You do engage in the discipline structures and the discipline knowledge. So you learn about biology. You learn about the heart. You learn how to work this. We're not saying that you don't learn content, but what we're saying, the first part of it, when you're at level 1, is you're guided to where the content is. So the tutor is guiding you, saying, oh, that reference that you use from there is not really, don't use those references, use the references that got ISBN numbers or ISN numbers, select your content, they're guided. Then as they been examined, they're coached and they say, well, what did you find out? What did you really find out? How did you find that? And they're coached in there until at the very end, when it's facilitating, I say, well, what can you contribute to the discipline? What have you learned that you can now give back to that discipline and you can engage in the discipline? Because this is what you're supposed to do, isn't it? When you've got a degree, you are supposed to be able to contribute to the discipline knowledge that you have been engaged with. How many of you contribute to the discipline knowledge? And what you find is people don't contribute because they've been constantly force-fed by these experts and they don't feel confident in doing it. But if we get in there early enough and do this, and curriculum becomes this process. Any questions on that so far?
Yeah.
Yes?
We are talking about curriculum as a process, and I think it has got something to do with assessment.
Yes?
If you want to talk about as a process, now you compare giving something based on experience rather than the 3-hour exam.
Yes?
Right? So if you want to go for curriculum as a product, right? Okay, you just give the test, that's the product. But for processes, because our universities are more engaged towards examination, they don't have much about looking at the process, which I believe that even though to the extent I'm not having exam, but if the process is good. So I just want your opinion.
Yes, I totally agree. Examinations are, well, I consider they're over, but not everyone. I mean, that's no. Controversial, that's very controversial that people shouldn't do exams. I mean, but I'm going to try and suggest to you as I go through the process that hopefully you'll see what we've come up with. You'll hopefully see what we've actually established and it links into what we've done before. Any other questions? So my argument is, really, tutors are facilitators, learners are engaged, and curriculum is a process. That's the argument. I'm saying what we've had in the past, where tutors transmitted, learners received, and curriculum was a product, is 20th century. That is the 20th century. If we want to move to the 21st century, we've got to think differently because we need to think differently. We cannot educate, it's economically unviable to educate everyone in the world in the old methods. It's just not financially viable to do. We can't build constantly build more and more and more schools, constantly employ more and more teachers. We can't do it. Financially, the government, it would ruin the country. We don't have enough money. So we've got to look at different ways of doing this. So I'm going to do what we did in 2009. I did a project called the Information Communication Technologies Professional Development Review. So as the Ministry of Education came to me and said, can you look at this ICT professional development that we've been delivering? I went, okay, that's not a problem. We'll look at that, and this is where we came up with the first model, which we called the deficit model. And you can see it's a transmission one, but really what we said is to the government, oh, you're investing all this money, and what are you doing? You're saying to your teachers, come along on Thursday night to School A, room 100, and learn how to do PowerPoint. And you do that for 6 weeks, and you'll learn Word and Excel and PowerPoint and all this, and away you're going at the end. And I said, and we know that this is not working. We know that the money you're spending on this professional development isn't working. Why do we know? Because we've got these models of learning that you've traditionally had. It just doesn't work. So what we said to them is, you're treating the teachers as if they've got an illness. You're actually saying to them, you're not really quite well. You're not a good enough teacher because you haven't got these IT skills. That's what you're telling them. And obviously, the teachers who are highly trained professionals are going, don't you dare tell me that I am not good enough. I'm a really good professional. I teach really well. What are you telling me that I need to be treated by you? This is rubbish. So they got a whole lot of resistance because they had the wrong attitude. It was a deficit model. So we said, you identified that they were deficient, you then treated them for this deficiency, and what do you get? A whole lot of resentment, and they didn't really use the tools that you're telling them to use anyway. So, when we said that was the model that you're using. And the next model that they used was an empowerment model. Now in this model, what they actually said, the government actually had some money, and they took, I think it was 10 or 15% of that money and put it aside and said, right, let's ask schools what they want to do. But no, let's make it more interesting. Let's ask clusters of schools in the same region. And schools came with these ideas like, we want to really learn how to use interactive whiteboards. We really want to use video conferencing. We really want to use learning management systems. Oh, do you? Well, what do you want to do? And the teachers themselves sat down and worked through a process and said, we want to be able to do A, B, C, D. And away they went, got the money, did A, B, C, D. Government went back, surprise, surprise. The money they spent actually did something because the people wanted what they spent the money on, not this deficit model. So this empowerment model was really, really beneficial for them. So they had all this money, they started to invest, was really beneficial. The money went into targeted programs that the people themselves really wanted to do, and there was greater impact. The biggest conference in New Zealand right now in ICT is with 2,000 people, and it's a school conference. And the schools that have got this money all present at that conference on the way they are using ICT in the country. And it's all from this. And it's called eLearn. The conference is called eLearn, and it's the biggest conference in New Zealand. And they get together and they share their ideas. And what happens is the clusters of schools that did things years before and new schools that want to do things get together, exchange ideas, and are able to feed off each other and get this money through. So So then you actually say, whoa, that's really interesting. Because what they are doing is reflecting. And this started to make us think in the Emerging Technology Centre, and we said, oh, reflection is the key of this, isn't it? The teachers themselves, the schools themselves, are reflecting on something. And the premise was deep learning is dependent on individuals making meaning of their experiences through ongoing reflection. We went, this is really, really critical. If you are going to have change, if you are going to make change, reflection is the key. So, if reflection is the key, I come back to what I said previously, there's an inherent risk. There's a real risk in this, and that the individuals are now responsible for their own learning. And the risk is you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know anything, you'll just keep reflecting on the fact that you don't know. And you'll try and solve that, but you don't know. And we've got to ask, are they prepared for this? And the short answer is no, they're not. And that's where, if you see this, then links back to what we were saying before. What we were saying before is that organisationally, you had to have a set benchmark, right? You had to have these benchmarks. Because organisation needed benchmarks to look at. We then started to apply the same principles with that organisational to the individual and started to say, oh, maybe that's where we should be thinking. Maybe we need set standards. So, key for us was reflection. Second part of that reflection was we had to identify international best practice standards that these teachers could reflect on as individuals. So we've got this. Reflection is the key part, standards is the next part. And we developed a certificate in open, flexible and networked learning, and this was just approved last year actually. It's called COFML. Obviously, if you look at the term, it's called open, flexible and networked learning. So what we had to do is have a look at what the future is going to be, and the future is going to be open. So education is going to be open to all. It's going to be flexible to meet their needs, and it is going to be networked. Whether we like it or not, computers are part of the world. The internet is part of the world. It is going to be networked. The learning that we're going to have is going to be networked. So where did we find the benchmarks? We went to and I was involved in the development of these standards, and we have got an organisation in New Zealand called the New Zealand Qualifications Authority. So if you want a qualification to be offered in New Zealand, nationally, offered in New Zealand, you develop the curriculum, you develop the standards, you send them off to the NZQA, they go take those standards away, get them monitored by people, see that they're true and accurate, come back and say, yes, that is right, that is the right standard, here we go, we'll put that on the board. And this is what we had. We had these units. And you can see what we went through the ones here, 10, 9, 12 credits, manage the provision, open distance learning. Within each of these questions there's a whole list, as I've shown you in the thing before about the questions you ask. So, first thing that we had then was we established the standards that we wanted people to do. We said for a person to deliver an open, flexible and networked teaching in this manner, they had to tell us or show to us that they were able to meet this criteria. And we got the criteria. It wasn't criteria we established, it was criteria that was recognised by someone, by the NZQA, wasn't recognised by us. And we developed a reflective framework. And what we did is we got people to ask themselves questions. And the questions, they could partially agree, strongly agree, disagree. They selected it, and as I showed you in the EMM model before, it changed colour. The darker the colour, the more competent you were. The lighter the colour, the less competent you were. Yes, exactly the same organisationally, pictorial carpet, starting to look exactly the same as this. What happened after that is we got this, we developed this into what we call the CAT. And the CAT is the competency assessment tool. And it's enabled to, and what it says is, if it's based on traffic lights. Now the concept of traffic lights is unfamiliar to people in Kuala Lumpur, I found out. Red actually means go if you can. Yellow means go faster before it turns red. And green is just normal traffic. So I don't know if you'll understand the concept quite as well as we do. But normally, green means good. You're really good at this. You've got all this done. Yellow means you might be competent, but you know, you need to really address it because there might be one of those key elements you're missing. And red means you are not going to pass this course at all. You're not going to pass that element. You need to address that element. And we get this pictorial carpet. If you notice, what we've got is all the standards have been identified. We've broke the standards down. We've got the standards in through here, and you can get a really good picture of what you do and what you don't do. What we do before we even enrol a student in the course is get them to do the assessment. So there's a self-reflective framework. We actually say to them, do this assessment. If you've got all red in every aspect, go away and do some more study. You are going to fail. You are going to struggle to get this. So we give, before the person even walks into the environment, before they're registered for the environment, we say to them, do the competency assessment tool. By doing that, you'll know exactly what we're going to ask you for. So there's no coming back to us at the end of the course and say, oh, you didn't tell us that we were going to do this. You didn't tell us that we were going to do that. Yes, we did. You answered the questions. If you answered them correctly, you would have found out that you were red on these, that you were yellow on that, that you were green on that. But we were up front with you. So we've given the student the really upfront assessment. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. You tell us if you know it or you don't know it. And we'll do that. What we have found, roughly, and this has only been going for the last 2 months, we've been starting to take enrolments in this, but it's only just been going. But roughly, what we have found is that everyone can deliver. Everyone, this is consistent with what we've found with organisations. Everyone can deliver. Everyone understands about it. What they don't do though, what teachers don't really do well, is actually get their material peer reviewed. Get their teaching practice peer reviewed. Get their teaching practice reviewed by their students. And use that student knowledge to actually do something about their changes in their courses. Reflection is, you can only reflect with information. So we've found that most of the people do all that and they go, oh, we've developed this Moodle course, yes. Oh, what we need to do is just make sure that we follow the standards and get it peer reviewed. Okay, we're going to get that certificate if we do this, and away they go. And it's been really, really beneficial for them to have that. Any questions on the CAT?
This is more of a standard.
It is a standard.
How do you compare with the NETs in America, National Education Technology? I see there's some similarities.
Yes, with the NZQA reviewed those, so they all match up. The standards that are there will there, and what we're actually saying is that we didn't set the standard, we just took the standards that were authorised, and we've worked with those standards because that's what the government has agreed, and we can feed back into those standards. But we haven't designed a course we didn't at Waikato Institute of Technology say we need to develop this course, let's develop a course that'll be wonderful. We actually said here's the standards, they're registered on the NZQA, let's use them. And that's how we developed it.
This one can apply for higher education or for...
Yes, this is level 5, this is a tertiary level 1.
I think it is my difficulty in actually in comparing between the so-called transmission model
Yep,
and the facilitation as well
Yep.
as the constructive unit. I cannot, you see, put in terms of really measuring, because I also always believe that if you want to go for the facilitation,
yes,
you need to have more materials in order to facilitate. If you don't have more materials, for example, materials mean materials, this is instructional.
yes,
In the case of, let's say, if I'm a teacher, I transmit a knowledge, right? Meaning to say I am learner-centered. No, I am teacher-centered. How much can I say? Well, this is the minimum or the maximum that I can give you being a lecture-centered kind of approach. And now you are going on your own, you facilitate, we facilitate a lot of materials there. So we do not know, we cannot be saying in the classroom, okay, you can go on your own and do it, this is flexible learning, this is network learning, do it on your own. But we cannot actually see the difference with it. When do you stop being a teacher-centered kind of approach?
good, because that's going to lead into what I'm saying. But yes, what we've actually got is we've got these standards, and we're saying, and if you've noticed, the question I've asked is, prove to us that you've done this. It's always, you prove to us that you've done this. It's not me saying to them, do course number 1 and pass these assessments. It is, you prove to us that you have done this. Given them the opportunity to provide us information. So, that comes down to really, the only way we can assess in these environments is through portfolios. The only way we can truly assess in these environments is with portfolios. We've got the standard, here's the standards, here's your proof to us. And that's the portfolios. So, when we look at a portfolio, it's the purposeful collections of an individual activities, structured to demonstrate effort and achievement against professional standards. People do performance reviews, capability development cycles, KPIs, all of that, all of those are actually standards, and you set yourself your standard. You say, right, I'm going to meet these KPIs, this performance, this whatever you call it, go back, come in. I mean, we do it all the time. As professionals, we do it all the time. It is not novel. It is really a part of that. So we've got that. The standards that we're using are those ones that have been approved by the NZQA. We've actually said they've been approved. That's the standard. You meet the standard. We're not inventing standards for them. We're saying it's there. What we're allowing them to do, though, is do it themselves. And because in accreditation environments, digital portfolios provide a protective space where learners' evidence of confidence can be rigorously controlled and systematically evaluated. So you've done something, you give it to me, I look at it, it's not good enough, send it back to you, redo it, give it to me. You talked about content before. Guess what I've already done by having a portfolio? I've actually identified that this person passed, and I say to this person, can I get your portfolio, that thing that you did on that element, and can I show people what a really good example of that standard is? Oh, I'm really pleased about that. And you've passed another element. And I put that element up. So the more and more people that do it, the more and more portfolios you get, the more and more content you've got, and the more and more people can actually then just go, I'm a primary school teacher, what did the primary school teacher do to get that? How did they work? And the content is student-generated content. It is no longer generated by the standard. The standard is generated by the tutor, the facilitator, but the content is actually generated by the learner. That doesn't mean that you don't have content, because you've got to have content to show them how to use things. I mean, content will be there. We've got to show them how to become competent in the technology and show them how to do these things. But the use of it, the reflection of it is there. I mean, content is still there, but there is a different role with content, especially around assessment. What we use is Exabus, which is a portfolio system. We are going to turn to another one, but reason why I chose this Exabus at this stage is all our tutors at Wintec, and most of over 70% of all tertiary institutions in New Zealand, and probably 40 or 50% of all schools use Moodle. All got competencies in using Moodle. So I've used the Exabus portfolio, which is integrated into Moodle to use it. Any questions about that? Did that answer some of your?
How do you consider the multiple intelligence or learning is style of the student? Are you considering that one, or you leave it for the next?
We're actually saying that the student chooses their own learning style, because they go through the pictorial carpet, and what we're hoping will happen is when they get the reds, they actually go, oh, I need to learn that. We don't tell them how to learn it, but better go back to how we deliver this. In delivering this, each person that is enrolled in the course gets a mentor. So, and people can enrol at any time. They can enrol any time, it doesn't matter. It's a rolling enrolment. So they start at a particular time. Whenever they choose to start, they've got 42 weeks to finish. We don't care when they start, as long as they finish within 42 weeks. So it's a rolling enrolment. So on entry, the person has done the CAT, and we allocate a mentor to them. And the mentor goes through the CAT and says, well, you know, you really need to do this, you really need to do that. What can I do to help you meet that achievement? And then the person has developed their own personal learning plan. So that person might be currently teaching in a school somewhere, and they say, oh, we're really developing content for biology for the next 3 months. I want to focus on that. We say, yes, do whatever. Yes, we can use that, but don't forget when you do it to get it peer reviewed. You know, yes, you've got that content, but don't forget to do this, and mentor them through it. What happens after that is that mentor then passes that information on to an assessor. So the assessor comes at the very end and goes, oh, you're ready to be assessed? Oh, there's your portfolio. Let me have a look. Here's the framework I'm assessing against. Tick, 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 tick. Yes, you've done it. No, you haven't. Totally independent. And we've done that specifically to have the reason. And I'll hopefully show you the reason why we've done it in that particular way when we come to this part here. Any other questions?
Developed for the teachers, right? Or for the administrators, not for the students, right?
No, this is for teachers. The certificate, it's an example of how we're developing curricula though. So even though it's for teachers, it's an example of how we're developing curricula. So, now we come to empowerment and action. What's in the future? So, we actually then got a couple of critical questions we start thinking about. Equity in education is to provide open access to internationally recognised education regardless of culture, physical location, economic background or language. really what that basically means, it's a fundamental right of every individual to have an education. I mean, fundamentally, it's a right of everyone to have an education. That's fundamental. That's what we actually say equity in education is. But then when you start talking about this equity in education, you actually say, well, what do we recognise as an internationally recognised certificate, degree? What is, to us, international? When your country, or even my country, or any country, credential qualifications, do they favour content and structure? Does the existing academic environment actually favour content and structure, and this curriculum as product? I want you to remember this, curriculum as product above everything else. Fundamentally. And then our individual conceptions of quality focus on institutional brands. So, I can sit and do an AeU university qualifications. But would people actually say, I got my degree from Harvard? Does that ring a bell in other people? Do we actually then say Harvard qualifications are the number one, Oxford qualifications are number one, Cambridge qualifications are number one, Stanford? Do we actually have a conception that institutional brands are the one? And when you look at institutional brands, you're looking at curriculum as product. What the institution is doing is selling you a product. I know that I'm not saying that Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge are not good teachers, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying conceptually what people are looking at is that it's a brand and it is a product. What they are selling you is a product. It's curriculum as product.
I do agree with you, because you see, if we are again going back to let's say Harvard. To me, Harvard is institutionally centered. Meaning to say, you come from Harvard, that means you're a good. But in ICT, I think, ICT is almost the same, cut across every nation. You have
Yes.
a good sound ICT kind of infrastructure, and of course we believe that content must be there, right? Maybe Harvard got a good content, but you see the content you can have it access from various sources. So our
Yes.
mindset is still geared towards very institutional. It's just like teacher centered. Right? Teacher centered to me is equivalent to like institutional centered. So
Yes.
we cannot get that kind of thing until now. We cannot solve that problem.
Hopefully we will, because what I'm suggesting, as soon as we have content and structure, as soon as we have institutions looking at content and structure, as soon as you start looking at institutional brand and product, your country is dependent on some other country setting the standards for you. You are no longer empowered. It brings a culture of dependency, because you always look externally and go, oh, that's a better one. That's a better one. That's a better one. And that concept of dependency will never empower people to move forward. So I want to talk about assessment rubrics, and I just want to ask you to think about these questions. What would happen if multiple international organisations identified and agreed upon best practice standards? And I'm talking about multiple institutions actually say these are recognised international best practice in commerce. These are internationally recognised standards in physics, nuclear physics, whatever. These are the one things that we need to know. This is what we believe is really valid. What would happen? What would happen if these standards were then used to create assessment rubrics? Little self-reflective frameworks that people could go through, actually challenge themselves to reflect upon whether they knew that or not, to actually engage with the discipline structures themselves, to know when they needed to be guided, to know when they needed to be facilitated, to know when they needed to be coached. What would happen if those were consistently monitored by an international consortium. So you can be in here and you can be mentored by your peers, and then it goes to New Zealand or Australia or some international partner, and they will look at the portfolio that you've provided, that contribution to your discipline structure that you provided. They will assess it, meeting the international standards. You will pass. Automatically, you have got an internationally recognised qualification that has been assessed following an international standards. Curriculum becomes a process. It is no longer a product. And the multiple international organisations could include Harvard and Oxford and all those others. It doesn't exclude them, but it's saying there. So then what we have is reflective frameworks creates international curricula, recognised international curricula. Reflective frameworks allows lots more people, it allows open access to the curricula, it allows governments to do it at an affordable cost, it puts the learning right at the point of the learner who develops their own personal learning plans and can create the content either in a physical classroom, if that is what is required, or in their place of work, if that's what they need to do to actually earn some money to survive while they get in the education. So, I come back to this. When we started, we had this little tune. We actually said that if you had a whole lot of instruments, you can play the tune and you play it to the right standard and you make sure you're playing the standard. It doesn't matter culturally if it's slightly different. You are following the standard. It meets your cultural needs, it meets your national needs, but it's still following an international standards. That's not an issue at all. What we say is when we understand the score, we play the tune. We are empowered. And that's empowerment from countries and individuals, and organisations are empowered. Remember what I had, kia ora? Haere rā means goodbye. Haere rā. We've designed this curriculum with this in mind, that we are actually saying, and we could be wrong, we could be on the wrong track, but we're actually saying, especially from where we are, so far away, we've got to be internationally recognised. We've got to be globally competitive. And then we go, well, we can't afford a Cambridge education for every student in our country. It's not going to happen. Can't afford a Harvard for everyone in our country. It's not going to happen. But we want all our learners to have this international recognition. How can we get this international recognition? We've got to look at curriculum in a different way. So we've got to look at it more as process. If we can't get this, we've got to actually cobble together, we've got to make sure that we're not devaluing the study. We've got to make sure that it's internationally recognised. And we can't then say, oh, we don't want, Standard 3 doesn't apply to us and Standard 4 doesn't apply to us. We'll say, no, you buy into the whole package. And then you can negotiate, but that negotiation is agreed by everyone, multiple institutions, and it's got to be done by multiple institutions. It can't be done by one or two. Multiple institutions have got to get hold of it and becomes really very valuable. Obviously what starts to happen is we then generate content. I mean, the students themselves from the very start are contributing to the discipline structure, because their portfolio is actually contributing to someone else's learning. The good bits that we use are contributing. So I think that's really important. We've got all those things working. Is it going to be successful? We've looked at it in a couple of countries, and one of the comments we got from an Arabic country was that the social part of learning was really important. and where was the social part? Where was the social part of learning in this thing? Because it was all very much a personalised learning plan, whereas in some cultures that social engagement, that discussion, but what we're actually saying, well, it doesn't mean that people can't work in groups or you can't have it in class. It's just allowing, it's that flexibility. So it's not a curriculum designed to be delivered in one particular way. It's a curriculum that can be delivered in multiple ways. So we're working through that at the moment, but that's where we are. We're positive, given the things that we've gone through, given that reflection is really important, portfolios is really important, best standards is really important, internet, we're sort of ticking the boxes and going, yes, we're addressing them. Are we perfect? No, we're not. But yes, we are making moves to the right place. Well, again, I come back to my first talk. What we actually look at all the time is how are people going to connect? What content are we going to provide and what capabilities do we need them to have? So that comes under the capability part. We can't, and this is what's happened in the past, people have, and I totally agree, people have invested lots of money in technology and say, well, we bought you 50 computers, why aren't you doing very well? Well, the reason why they're not doing very well is they forgot what content they were going to put on these computers and what capability the students have to do that, and the teachers had to use it. So you've got to approach it in a very systematic way. Organisationally, you've got to approach things in a very systematic way. And you've got to, what we call, iterate up the process. E-capability does not come overnight. It comes from slow but sure iterations coming up the thing. What we did then is took that and transferred it to this. And we're starting to think that this is more of a way that we should be starting to think of lifting the capability. We started then to think about the capability of learners rather than organisations. So we're still thinking of that pedagogical part of it. And we're, that learner-centric personal learning plans, it starts to make sense to us, especially when we realise that financially we're just not able to provide that sort of education that would be desirable. Like, it would be really desirable if every New Zealand student attended Cambridge. It ain't going to work. I mean, it's not going to happen. But it's the right of every New Zealand student to have an internationally recognised qualification. So that's where we started to think about this. Again, it's thoughts for discussion. We are using it, and we'll let you, as we develop through it, we'll see what happens. But we're quite happy at the moment with the progress we're making. Students only like the way, if you're brutally honest about why students like the conventional ways of doing it, is because they're successful at it. So, if I'm successful at doing something, and yep. Oh, don't give me anything. Oh, no, I'm not interested in that because I'm successful here. Don't do that. Same as teachers. Teachers don't want to change if things have been successful. Problem is that we've got to look at is the person that we're producing, that educated individual we're producing, are they contributing to where we want to go? Have we really educated them? Have we educated them? Or have we got them to recall? So we've got to really start thinking about what we want from the individual. What is the individual going to contribute again? So the biggest issue then comes down to, well, the learner is going to do this, but then really in reality you actually ask yourself, why will the learner want this like this? Why do they want it? Because it's been successful, yes. But who has created that environment of success? There's actually the tutor, the lecturer. The lecturer who learned and was successful this way. This is the way I learned. I did this, and to be really like me, and I'm really good, you've got to do exactly what I did. They've forgotten, or they haven't realised, or they're not thinking about What is the new 21st century learner need to do? What do they need to do? They need to be more agile. They need to be thinking, dragging information from the web, social networks, Facebook, making decisions with all this information flowing into them, rather than sitting there focusing on one topic, getting this topic done, answering the right questions, because that's what they've done for. The world is just full of this information and communications, and everything's coming in, and they've got to cope with all this, make instant decisions that are going to affect what they do in the future, and we've got to train them for that. And I think that's where the tutors, current tutors, haven't quite realised that the world is changing. That the information flow is just huge. That the communication flow is huge. How many people here have got a Facebook site? People got one? You're on it all the time? I mean, how much information comes across your computer in a day? There's tons of it. And yet you've got to react to it, you've got to make a decision, you've got to make a choice. Oh, I'll ignore that now because that can be answered later. Oh, I've got to respond to that now, I've got to do this. It's making people make decisions on the fly, all of this, and it's all changing. And curriculums that don't accept that are going to put people at a disadvantage. The world is going to move on. Decisions that have been made before they've even thought about it. You know, it's gone. The opportunity has passed them by. This is my site here that I have. So here it is. So what I do here is I click on this, and it's got all these questions. And as you can see, it changes the things as it comes up. And I can go through, answer those questions, then ask these questions. And then the cat will actually come up. As it changes. So that's what we call the CAT. This is the competency assessment tool that we use as basically just as a tool to decide learners. You notice we've got, when you look at this, there's quite a lot of things that are there. So when I now come back to review this and I go, okay, where am I? Oh, that moderation. Demonstrate a commitment to the role of a open flexible network teacher. So why am I red there? What's the problem there? And I can go down here to moderation, and I can see that my understanding, evidence. I can provide, I haven't provided digital evidence. Oh, if I just got that Moodle site and I captured a screenshot of that and I wrote an explanation about that, okay, so I've now done that. That's all right, I strongly agree with that. And I can provide digital, yes, I can. So I posted that discussion forum to that group the other week, and I quoted all these things. So I can prove that, so I'll just now can do that. And you can see that the CAT is a living tool all the time. They can actually go backwards and forwards and actually look at that. What they do with that is, and here, I'll go back to here. You can see here I've got support systems. Each of these are slightly different. We have some resources here that they all get, but it's all part of here. But this is the portfolio that they have, and this is my portfolio. It's got my information. It's got the categories that I've created. And the big part about this is the shared portfolio. So what I can do is actually go in here and say, and down here I've got access, I can have it internal and external. Now this portfolio, what that does is allow me to do moderation anywhere in the world. I just provide the link to an assessor somewhere else in the world, they have a look at it, away they go. So I can get international assessment with a click of a button. So I don't have to gather all this stuff, put it in a big folder in a big box and send it away and then get it all done, and then I can just go click, here you are, have a look at this, tell me if it meets the requirements, if it meets all the criteria, and it can come back really, really quickly. So that's, in this portfolio system we're moving slightly away from at the moment. We're going to another one called Mahara, but that doesn't matter. Key thing for us in this one, have you heard of SCORM? Shareable Content Object Resource Modules. What I can do with this is actually export my portfolio, export it all, put it onto a CD and use it as my CV as I post it away. So I can have a record of my work, portfolio of my work, for any job application that I want to do, and post it away to them. Because it can be on that. So that's what we're thinking about. This is life, we're talking about lifelong learning here. So that's what we have on that. Welcome back. What I've called this session is quality counts, and we've gone through in the last 2 sessions we've actually said, well, we really want to address e-learning capability both from an organisational level, and that's the EMM models, and then from an individual level, and we've had a look at reflective frameworks and how we develop curricula to meet that thing. So we're looking at that. But one thing that should underpin everything we do is quality and the measurement of impact. And it's very difficult to actually do this and do it well, because this is the one issue that we don't do well in most institutions, and it's ki te whakawhaka i te iwi. This is just the vision statement of Wintec, but the iwi means, iwi is tribe. The spirit of your tribe will be with you, basically. Iwi is tribe, as the tribe, is tribe. So, leading questions. Managing complexity and asking for quality in public sectors is sometimes like this person. He feels like this. It's banging your head against a brick wall. When you ask for quality, you get thousands of reasons why you can't get it done. And when you do get it done, you get tons and tons of paperwork about how they've done it. And yet, in reality, it doesn't do anything. It's a really frustrating exercise. But what we've been doing in the Emerging Technologies Centre in 2006, we've been involved in lots of e-learning projects involved in use of e-learning, building capability, both in the workforce, both in vocational education, and a whole lot of stuff around schools. So we've been looking at this issue for quite some time. And all the findings, no matter whether it's for industry, whether it's for schools, they've all said that institutions and learners need to be assured that the e-activities deployed will do what they say they will do, are efficient and cost effective, and bring maximum returns. So the government wants to know that the money it's investing is well spent, and the learners want to know that the activities they're engaging will lead to a qualified credential, recognised credential. So they've got all this. All these things are really important. The only way we can assure everyone that these things are actually there is by a rigorous quality mechanism. So, key concepts. Return on investment. And when we talk about return on investment, we're talking about return on investment from 2 angles. One is the individual level. I'm spending my time learning. I want a return for the learning I do. The institution is spending time developing resources. They want a return on investment. So there are 2 real aspects that we do when we call a return on investment. One is at an individual, and the second is at the organisational level. And the third one is quality. And quality revolves around all of the processes used in the creating of the training event. Quality of the experience of all participants in an e-learning environment. So quality encapsulates quite a lot of stuff. What we don't want to happen is we get this idea that e-learning is this digital diploma mill, where you walk in, if we spin this fast enough, the whole quality thing will go away. You know, we don't want e-learning, or you don't want your institution associated with e-learning that is diploma mill type stuff. The only way you can get away from the diploma mill type stuff is show people that you've got quality and rigorous procedures around what you do. And like I say, the quality of any e-learning implementation is directly attributed to the quality of the processes used in the creation of the event. So, I ask you a simple question then. What is a learning object? Has anyone heard of this concept, learning object? You heard of learning objects? What does a learning object mean? Learning objects actually mean that they're reusable, durable, affordable, searchable, retrievable, stored for others to use, and you have a central repository of them. And so I can pick a learning object up, use it in my course, and put it back. For example, in nursing, I might need to know how to take someone's blood pressure. So I've got a learning object on blood pressure. I use it in my course. Nursing 101 use it in their course. Anatomy and physiology use it for sports science in their course. But we're using the same object multiple times. Cost effective, yes. Efficient, yes. But what is a learning object? Is a learning object a whole piece of paper? Is it a whole lot of content? What is a learning object? Once you start thinking of what a learning object is, we actually start looking at this. First concept is that learning objects are made up of assets and granules. I have got content, I have got images, I've got a description of this piece of thing. But assets and granules, content on its own is not a learning object. So I've got a picture of a blood pressure machine. I've got a description of how that blood pressure machine works. They are assets and granules. They're called assets and granules. You put them together, it's not a learning object at all. So what you then say to yourself is, oh, what we really need to do is have a look at giving some information with it. So we structure it, we resequence it, we put it together. And this is what we call knowledge objects. But what we find is it's bound by a specific authoring tool in which the object was created. It's still not a learning object, it's called a knowledge object. Then we do something else with that knowledge object. We start tracking student activity and LMS functionality. And what we have here is an information object. Still not a learning object. Notice we've gone from assets and granules. We've added little bits to it. We've got knowledge objects. We've added bits to it. We've got information objects. It's informing me about how to take blood pressure. It's informing me what it does, but it's still not a learning object. The key to any learning object is that they've got to have assessments. And guess what the assessment has got to relate to? A learning objective. That's why they're called learning objects. I will create a learning object, but the sole purpose of that learning object is to meet a learning objective. And learning objectives are measured by assessments. So, for my example on blood pressure, my learning objective is that all students will be able to take blood pressure tests. Right? What's my assessment going to be? How am I going to assess this? Am I going to assess it through multiple choice questions about the procedures, you know? What are the correct procedures that you need to do to take blood pressure? Make sure the person is here, make sure they do that. So I could ask the questions, okay, I've now got my assessment. What information does the student now need to complete that assessment? What assets do I need? What granules do I need? How can I combine these together to meet this assessment, and how will this assessment meet my learning objective? As soon as I have got that done, I can now say to anyone, using metadata, we won't go into that field, but I can now say to anyone, if you use this learning object, it will complete this learning objective. You, as a tutor, can look at the learning objectives and go, no, I don't really want that. That doesn't meet my criteria. I want another one. So where's the one that meets my learning objective? My learning objective here is this. Where is it? And if it's not there, you repurpose, but you look for the learning objective. So your students are quite clearly getting material that's useful to them. So we call this concept, that learning object concept. Where am I? I don't want to be there, I want to be here. Oh. Oh. Right, I went too far. So here we have these things here. You can see this is our ideal state. This is the state we want to be in, where we've got all these learning objectives that people can use, and we want to be ensured everyone that uses this learning object repository is assured that when they pick the material out of this repository, it will meet their specific learning objective. If you can't describe the learning objective, it shouldn't be in any repository to be reused. You shouldn't be doing it. In fact, you shouldn't be developing material that you can't identify a learning objective from. You're just wasting your time. You're providing information to students. And really what this is called, we call it the bike. So we've got chunks of information, we put them together, we start to engage students, but the evaluation of progress is the key to the learning object. As soon as I can evaluate the student's progress, the learning object has met its goal. If I can't evaluate students' progress, why have I given them the material? If I can't evaluate it, don't give them the material. Did that flick on? So, when we could start looking then at the processes used in the creation of these digital materials, the tutor, mentoring, supporting of learners, and the administration of workplace and workplace training events. I'm jumping around here a bit, but we'll be right. Yep. So this is what quality assurance is, and what we come up with is the thing, and if you've heard of AeU, this is a similar model. We call this the 5 Ds of e-learning for industry. This was developed by the Emerging Technology Centre for a project we did in e-learning in industries, and they wanted to know what were they going to do. So he said, well, you've got to do these 5 Ds. Before you even start developing material and spending money, make sure you define what you want to do. Define what it actually is you want to do. If you don't know what to do, you're going to pour money into a big black hole and you're just going to waste the money. Define what you are going to do. As soon as you define it, design it. Design the interactivity. Say what assets and granules you're going to have. Tell us how you're going to assess student progress. Tell us how you're going to evaluate the learning projects. Then you develop them using a whole range. Knowing that we started this morning, you've got to realise what sort of connections you've got, what sort of content you can deliver down that connection, what sort of capability you are, but you get to use this. Then obviously you deliver it, and the most important part about it is you determine whether the thing was successful or not. This is a cyclical model, because as soon as you've determined whether it was successful or not, you can redefine whether the material was successful or not, and you can go back and redo that stuff. So with this here, you flow through, and this is commonly called the AeU model, but we changed it because we felt that the 5 Ds were more important. And if you can see each learning object, each series of learning objects that make a course, each series of courses that make up a program, you have to do the same thing. If you apply the same process from the very smallest unit to the most complex unit, you are going to follow quality. You are going to have quality assurance. I define, design, develop, deliver, determine. For each little learning objective that I've got, and for each objective that makes a course and each course that makes the program, if I follow that system, I am going to have quality. Any questions on that?
I just wonder, when we prepare the e-learning for existing program that we already designed, I'm sure that we already went through all the stages in designing the curriculum, but it may be the same as what we showed here. So we have to repeat, the same process, and I mean, how does it affect the way, because it's a new program, we designed to be e-learning, okay, you can go through these stages, but for the existing program, what's the implication?
I think my biggest worry about, and I've seen this happen, and we've done it, and we do this all the time. So we have an existing course, someone's got all this existing material, they've got all these things, and they say, right, put it online. And we get it, and we make it interactive, and we put the hot potato quizzes, and we put all the things together, and we do all that, and put it online. What we fundamentally don't do, though, is actually, if we're actually saying we need all our material to be peer reviewed, we shouldn't just accept when that course comes to us to put it online that it is there. We should actually go, this is an ideal opportunity for peer review right now. Let's peer review this material. Automatically, any issues that might have occurred in the past with that particular course, student dissatisfaction or whatever it might have been that might have happened, you say, right, no, this is a clean slate, we are readjusting. It might be the course is perfectly good, everything's done, but because you've gone through the process, everyone then is really happy that you've done some quality assurance. If the course is actually suspect in some ways, you're lucky you picked it up before you used e-learning to deliver it and tarnished your reputation and quality. So I think, yes, I totally agree that some of them can be there, but it is an opportunity, and it could be a quick review. I'm not saying you have to do an extensive line by line review, but you have to, I think it would be really beneficial if you sat there and say, let's take the opportunity to look at this, let's take 10% of the course and go through it and say, yes, this has met that learning objective. Oh, that looks good. Right, yeah. Oh, hang on a minute, this doesn't look right. This bit doesn't look right. What? You know, let's do a bigger review. So it could be quite quick, but it can also be good. It could be, well, some of them, I'm not, without decrying teachers too much, or tutors too much, some of them do tend to have a lot of knowledge. So I sit here and I'll give you all the knowledge in the world about my discipline, tons of it, absolutely bucket loads of it, but you only need 20% of that to complete the course. And yet I've given you all this material out of my own personal interest, and yet you really, when you looked at the learning objects, you don't need that much content to cover it. So, you know, it could be that the person has given them way too much information in the past. And it's sort of that check and balance would be really good. Good instructional designers can do this fairly rapidly. It's a skill that you acquire, but once you've acquired it, it's relatively simple to actually look at a course and go, ah, yes, there it is, there's the assets, there's the granule, there's the engagement, there's the assessment, done. So let me show you something here then. I'll just, no, why will this never do anything when I want it to do it? So in here, like this, if you have a look at this, you can now look at this and go, what is all this about? Now this is my explanation of what a learning object is. And as you go through it, you can see this is actually an acid and a granule. It's actually, it hasn't informed you, I haven't engaged you and actually asked you, do you understand what it is? I've told you what it is, I've given you examples of what it is, but there is no evaluation of your understanding in this. So this is not a learning object. This is actually just an informational object. For it to be truly a learning object, there's got to be some evaluation. I've got to know what it's all about. Now the complex ideas, I'm not saying that the complex ideas could be then at the very end, and then I look at this and go, okay, there's a lot of complexity around this. Let's go to the very bottom. This is where you would find truly find the evaluation, giving you all the information objects. Is there an evaluation here? Oh, no. So even though it's got lots of information here, it's actually not a learning object. The whole thing is actually an informational object. And it's designed to be an informational object. And what I should do now that I've now looked at this, I'll put an evaluation there to actually put it there. But does that sort of make sense to you?
I do agree with Dr. John that most of our materials that we have in the web, to me, are not exactly learning objects, because it's not easy to make a learning object because it's not based on the 5Ds or by the ADDIE model. Right? But in here at AeU, what we do is we have what you call SIM. We call it self-instructional module. So the self-instructional modules, I think we have all the components of the 4 components that you see, the knowledge, the grammar, the assets, and all that kind, right? And we thought that is going to be a learning object, but that exactly is not. So what happened, most of the universities in Malaysia have been spending a lot of money when they create that self-instructional module where they don't actually detect the real problems. Like you say, you use the 5Ds. So to us, the learning object is to support this self-instructional module that we have. So we identify certain things, let's say we give them a module, the C we call it, and then later on we don't make it everything in the multimedia form, right? Because it's
Yeah.
quite costly. So we just identify certain areas that needs the learning object, whereby we use all these principles, you know, of instruction design or whatever. So that's how we.
Yep. I told that is actually what you saw is a self-instructional material. It is not a learning object. However, when it comes down to quality and measuring impact, and if we keep focusing on iteratively improving capability, if that's what you want to be, better at what you do, one of the things we do not do well in any institution, I'm talking from New Zealand perspective everywhere in the world, is we don't evaluate the way we're doing it. We don't measure impact. We're very poor at doing it. And it's not, it's worldwide. We find it exactly the same. That's why we're struggling, but we're trying to address the issue. And it's more about that. Any other questions on quality? Quite happy with that?
So when do you actually put it now? We have another question which is also, posing a problem in Malaysia, especially when we talk about, to us, e-learning equals LMS, right? Before. When we talk about e-learning, you are talking about, do you have a learning management system, right? What learning management system you are using? Is it you are using Moodle, using Blackboard, or using WebCity, right? So, you know, so then we tend to put in whatever we call the learning objects into the LMS, right? That's the one that you see. So much so sometimes, because like you say, John said, that we don't really actually use the 5Ds or whatever, then you just put in, right, the learning objects or whatever you call it.
Learning objects.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do you have the experience in
So what we're currently doing at the moment, and we're developing this in a project that I am currently involved in this project, and we're still conceptually thinking about it, but what we have is one big Moodle course. And this Moodle course is owned by no one. It's just a central repository. And what we've got is multiple institutions are automatically linked to this course. The course doesn't do anything at all, just sits there as a standalone thing. So the courses are delivered to an institution, goes in and says, I want to use course 1. Course 1 goes to that institution and it's delivered through their LMS. It's delivered, they take all the marks, do everything through their LMS, but the course is not in there. So the same, another institution wants course 1. They choose course 1. Their students are doing the same course, but it's through their LMS. What we're calling this is called networked Moodles. So the idea is you network your Moodle sites and you base it on a core group, and all the Moodles hit one core Moodle site. When you look at it like that, we're starting to, obviously, as soon as I start to do that, this is getting technical, so you'll have to bear with me for a little while. But as soon as I start doing that, if I have multiple disciplines and I've got multiple hits on this one core Moodle site, pulling multiple courses and media from it, it just blows the system to bits. So what we now started to think of is having discipline-specific Moodle cores. And so if you're in nursing, you come. If you're in business studies, you'll go to another Moodle. But it'll still be the institution, one Moodle site, but hit in different repositories for their courses. We're having a look at that, mainly because of the processing power at the central end. And the amount of media that starts to pour out, once I've got multiple people and multiple courses using the same content multiple times, it starts to really impact on quality. And so to actually reduce that, we're looking at at a whole list of strategies around that. But conceptually what we're doing is looking at that centralisation. And that's what we believe will, and that centralisation then drives quality. I'm going to show you, hopefully I'll explain how that comes in a little while, but that's what we're trying to do. Okay. So, next part, return of investment. And I've said we need evaluation of effectiveness, individual, organisational level. These are always critical factors. You can't get away from it. Just because I as an individual think I'm doing really well as a teacher doesn't mean that my course is sustainable and that my course is good. You know, I might be the most wonderful teacher in the world and people love me and my students love me, but the course might not be viable. So you've got to look at return of investment both from an individual and organisational level, and you've got to make changes to adapt to that. So what I was teaching in 2003, I might have to alter by 30% to teach in 2008 because there's been a shift in focus in accountancy methods or economical theory. So I've got to adjust and flex around because the organisation wants it to happen. And if you've heard of Kilpatrick's Phillips has a model. Kilpatrick had the 4 steps, Phillips had the return on investment, and there are basically 2 parts of that. There's the individual, which is satisfaction and accomplishment, and there's the organisation, which is application, impact and return of investment. This is all done for industry. Again, this is a one that we did for industry to have a look at how they would actually go through this. So when we have a look at that, we actually say, how then do we measure this return of investment? How can we measure return of investment? So at an individual level, which is the satisfaction and accomplishment level, I can do multiple things. So one of the things that I could do is have someone in the back of this room evaluating my presentation. And that person could write down what I did right, what I did wrong, you know, all that stuff could happen. Problem with that, when you look at it from an organisational level, is the cost involved. You know, I've got a cost of that person sitting at the back doing that. The second part of that is the disputes that occur between what the person observed and what I think I was doing. And you have some contention around what goes on. The other way to do a return on investment, looking at the individual satisfaction, and the simplest way is to actually ask you what you felt. And that's based on this formula here, which is called the Llewellyn formula, which actually says your behaviour in courses and learning activities is a function of you and your environment. So, in New Zealand, in Māori, red and black are really very popular colours. Extremely popular. If I walked into this room and it was red and black and had what we call kawhawhai patterns around it, and it suited my cultural style, I'd be more settled in that environment and I might perform better. I mean, even you've seen this in classrooms, and when you walk into a primary school, they have photos and students' works. People feel they're part of the environment, so it's true. The formula acknowledges both the environment and its interaction with personal characteristics of the personal determinants of human behaviour. So, we know this is true. So, the problem then comes down to, well, if I ask you, did you like it, is that actually going to do anything for me? Not really. Were you satisfied? What does that do for me? You know, I'm going to collect all this information. Anonymous or not anonymous, I'm going to get it. So you're satisfied. What's satisfied mean? What does it actually mean? It doesn't mean anything. Did you like it? Doesn't mean anything. We've got to be really if we're going to talk about quality and we're going to talk about return on investment, we've got to be really conscious of what we do. So we need to actually systematically look at what makes up this environment. And we know what makes up this environment are systems or maintenance or physical things. The room, the chairs, comfort, etc. Systems, types like that. We've got your own personal feelings about why you're here, why you're not here, what's going to happen. You know, your own personal dimensions, your own personal satisfaction things. And we've got relationship dimensions, both your relationships with me as a tutor and with the individuals in the group. If I address each of those dimensions, all of them, I will get a good picture of what this environment is like. I can't just address one of them. And quite a lot of the surveys that we do currently are all around personal development dimensions. Did you like it? What did you think of this? And they don't actually truly address what's going on in the environment. So, when I ask about e-learning then, I want you to think of this little problem. You've got a young niece, nephew, daughter. You're going to buy a gift. And you're going to buy a set of coloured crayons, coloured pencils. You go to a gift store and find a range of options. And you've seen them. I've been to a gift store and you can have a little thin box of 12. You can have a gigantic box of 256. Huge, small, I mean they're there, these coloured pencils. If I asked you, could you describe the colours? And I talked about blue. There is dark blue, there's light blue, there's medium blue, there's mid blue, there's navy blue. Hundreds and hundreds of colours. And we can describe them all. And then if I asked you how you use them, what would happen if you used the point? What would happen if you used the flat part? You know, what would happen as you use the flat part? What would happen if you use the point? You'd all be able to tell me different things. And you'd all be able to describe the colours, and you'd all be able to do that and these things. And then I say to you, well, what are the key elements then of that box of crayons? What are the key attributes of that box of crayons that I can measure? And it's really very simple. There's only 5 of them. No matter how many colours I've got, they're made up of the basic key elements. What I have to do is identify the key elements. If I can identify the key elements, I can measure the key elements and everything will be good. It's all about quality. Key elements equal quality. So, then when I look at the online learning environment, here's the key elements. So there's an e-learning environment, key element, and people have got to be confident in the technology. If they're not confident in the technology, they're going to be anxious, they're going to be nervous, they're going to resist. They've got to have the material environment that means when I say play a CD, they've got a CD player on it. They've got this material. They want to work. Students learn by talking to other students. We know this. We've got to have, so one of the questions I always have is, we talk about the importance of the social engagement and they say, well, I get lots of students' queries from the tutor and then they don't, the students, they don't seem to talk to each other, they don't seem to do these things. Yet we do know from our own experience that talking with students is really important. You know, as students share their ideas, it's really important. My question to the people who developed that course is, well, what assessment have you put in there that actually asks students to peer review each other's work? Oh, we haven't done that. And you then say, well, guess what? Students only do things for marks. Students are at your institution, whether you like it or not, to get a credential qualification. And anything that gets the credentials for them, they will do. If it doesn't get the credential, they won't do. You can be the most passionate person about your subject in the world, and it will not make students read up on that subject. What they will read is, I'm going to give you an essay at the end of the year, these 5 readings are involved in it, answer it, they'll go and read that. So you've got to design your activity to involve that student collaboration. Tutor support. They've got to really believe that tutors are involved. One of the courses I was teaching at one stage, I made it quite plain to students. One of the big traps with e-learning is you put your course online and then you see how many people are accessing it. And you're always in there and you've got to respond to these people immediately, you know. You go, what? I don't do that in class, why should I do that now? But what I told my students quite up front, in the very front of my course, straight away is, I'm going to respond to your queries at 11 o'clock on Monday morning and at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I'm going to be there, that's my course, I deliver the course, but I'm going to spend 1 hour, this is my allocated time, it's going to be Monday, it's going to be Friday. Guess what? Monday morning, 9 o'clock, everyone was on the course. They were there posting the questions, they knew I was going to answer it, and it was my responsibility to answer, and then till 11, after I'd finished, they were back there looking at the responses. Same thing happened on Friday. The rest of the time it was quiet, but that was obvious. It was obviously why it was going to be quiet, because I'd done that. But you notice I'd established a relationship. Actively, you've got to have engaged content. No matter what you do, you've got to have content that engages students. It's got to have formative feedback. You can't just give them lots of information and say, read this. They ain't going to do it. It isn't going to happen. No matter what you do, it isn't going to happen. Got to engage them with it. Information design and appeal is actually crucial. So, what used to be good for me like this, and I'm reading a book at arm's length, is now totally different, because I've got a keyboard in front of me. So the font size that is good on paper, where I'm reading it like this, is no longer good in the e-learning world, because there is a difference. So you've got to think about this information design and appeal, the way you use colours, the way you use fonts, the size of fonts, that's all got to be important, and obviously reflective thinking, the way you encourage that reflective thinking. These were the key elements that I actually organised to say that this made up an online learning environment. What I did with this is then I put it on a web server. Reason why I put it on a web server is we get transcribing there as data collection. Those who have done data collection by paper, pen and paper, always note that there is data corruption. The transference of data from the person, as they put an intermediary in, you always get data corruption. This, I got exactly what the student said. What the person said, I got. I did a whole list of agreement stuff. They submitted the form, and the other big thing about me was all electronic. I had it in a CSV file. I was able to put it in SPSS, and I was able to analyse information. Really, really simple stuff. So web-based surveying is the best way to go. I mean, there's no doubt about that at all. And it looked like this. And here it is sitting here. This was I want you to notice what I've done here though. I've used 2 of the elements. And why I used the 2 of the elements is where am I? is in this particular course, what I was doing is we had a video below driving after reviewing the clip past the questions in the quiz. But what I really wanted to know was, did this learning object, this video, so I was actually analysing the learning object. I didn't want this person to do a 35 instrument, I wanted them to do a little bit. But because I had it all in here, I could manipulate the survey to do multiple things. And then I can go in to look at the responses. This is just a testing thing. And it shows me what's going on, what the people felt about this. The video showed creativity in layout and design. Ooh, video is well produced. Ooh, it's telling me if I'm going to use that, if I'm going to use a video on driving again, I better get a better one. Students didn't like that one. So by using this thing, by actually being systematic about this, I got some instantaneous results. Now this is really quick. I just put it in. It's already sitting there. I put it in. I get the instantaneous results. I get instantaneous feedback. I don't have to do a full research project. I don't have to do all that. I can get instantaneous feedback from this thing. What does it do? Improve quality. I can do this at the start of the course, at the end of the course, whenever I want to do this. And to come back to this, if we have this centralised repository idea, I can get multiple people telling me from multiple areas how good that object was, and I'll have hundreds of responses, which will truly tell me the quality of the material I'm delivering. So you can see that's really quite a simple little exercise. And that review. And what I can do with these is have these in separate areas, and that's what the course looked like. Just entering that, very, very simple, very quick, very easy to do. This here is it's sitting in what they call the questionnaire functionality of Moodle, and I can create these questionnaires and share them with multiple people. So, and I'll come on to that later. But this is the idea of that. And what I did with this is then I went through to give me some assurance about the quality of each of the scales. I went through with this. I don't know if you can, if you understand this, but basically what this actually tells me is that the scores are all negatively skewed, have a positive Kurtos value. So in general, most of the students were positive about their online learning environment. The sample equal 248 that I had. This is just to validate the instrument before I started using. Obviously, before I started using these things in a full online environment like that video environment, we tested the environment, equal 248. This is what their online competence says. And what I want you to know, what I want you to look at this, is actually look what I do when I look at these things. I'm able to make an informed judgment on quality, on the quality of the course. I am saying before in looking at this, one of the things that the students didn't get was told what the technical competencies required were. So they were anxious. To reduce that, you can do that. Student collaboration, obviously, you need to design peer review activities. The peer review activities are not there. But I want you to think about, as you start seeing this, all the time, the data that I collect has allowed me to make a qualitative qualitative judgment. And so I can say, look, this is what it's trending to be. Tutors need to communicate regularly. Must be visual into it and must be read at the appropriate level. Let me give you an example of e-learning, what this actually means. Not very far from Hamilton in New Zealand, there is a place called Huntly, and it's a very small town, and the literacy levels in Huntly are extremely low. It's a very socio-economic backward area. Literacy levels are low. They have one power station. In the power station, they have some very brilliant engineers. So in some areas, the literacy level is extremely high, and the cleaners, the literacy level is poor. The company decided that everyone, from the most brilliant to the cleaner, most illiterate, was going to do e-learning. There was no question about it. They were all going to do e-learning. Why did they want them to do e-learning? What they had is on their doors, on different doors, they had swipe cards. And different areas of the power plant required you to understand the safety procedures of that area before you were allowed in. The only way they could judge whether you had the required competencies was for you to have completed a training package. If you completed the training package, your swipe card allowed you into the room. If you hadn't completed the training package, you were not allowed into the room, into the enclosed space, or whatever they call it. There was confined spaces, enclosed spaces, I don't know, there was these things. So, everyone, every single person, and to do this electronically, they had to have the e-learning test. So, they sat down there, got all the students, did all the e-learning training, and what do you think they found? Can you guess what they found? No? The participants didn't mind e-learning at all. They could use a computer, fully functional computer, absolutely brilliantly. Not a problem. They could use mouses, they could look at screens, keyboards, not a problem. The only issue they had was they couldn't read the material. They were illiterate. They just couldn't do it. But they had confidence in the technology. Simple solution for them is they made it audio. So you click on a thing, you can read it, or you can listen to the audio. And they've got e-learning. E-learning does not have to be text-based. E-learning has to meet a need that you've got. So all of their training is now done by e-learning. They found that the cost of compliance training reduced by approximately, I think it was called, 2 million New Zealand dollars. The people were always on station. They were always on task. They didn't have these issues of pulling them in, pulling them out, not being available to do that. Production went up. You know, the people were in the rooms, they had the rooms doing their jobs. Everything was much more streamlined. They just went, why haven't we been doing this before? Why have we not been using these e-learning technologies before? Because they were so much simpler. What they've done now with their swipe card, or what they're starting to do now with their swipe card, is they've got a safety regime, and the people have to go through a safety, they have to do safety checks of the various parts of the equipment to make sure that it's all been serviced properly, etc. They're using the same swipe card technology to make sure that the person has actually gone past something, that they've turned something on that they're supposed to turn off, or tested, and it's all related back to the person's swipe card. So e-learning, in that case, is sometimes really intertwined between e-reporting. They're very much compliance. They're not education, they're compliance. They're very much about you can do the job or you can't do the job. They're not worried about, oh, you can think. You know, I mean, that's their job. Their business is to make money, so they want that. So that's why I say about this information design and appeal, it's really important that we don't limit ourselves just to text, that there are videos, that there are audio, that there are different methods that we can deal with literacy problems and reading problems. Course functionality, we're getting close to having more tea. I'm just going to... So, I was able to use this survey. We did a survey with 155 registered nurses looking at what we call point of care competency manuals. I was able to actually go through this survey. It's been a proven survey. Said that it does this, okay. District Health Board said yes, let's try this out. I was able to do this computer confidence and tell them exactly what that place was, and they said, oh, that's really interesting. The staff here, the registered nurses, have got good competence, and what we call the hard to reach populations, that is the people that were out in rural and district areas, similar results, indicated significant majority. What I'm saying to you now, though, is the development of a systematic instrument to investigate quality gave external organisations like the District Health Board the belief that educational institutions can deliver to them. Just that perception that they had, that we've got instruments that evaluate quality and are rigorous about it, got them to come to us. We didn't have to chase them, they wanted to come to us because we had the experience. And that's what a strict regime on quality does for your organisational reputation. And I think we're going to have a break. Is that 3:30? Yes? Any before that though, any questions? No? We're all good. We'll come back after 3:30 for a...
Just the result showed the two sets of people, one with the rural area people,
Yeah.
and one those more literate
Yeah.
exposure. So then they will have different level of what the competencies needed, right? When you design it, because there's a gap,
Slight. Yeah.
And therefore, when you design the e-learning materials will be different. Because you need,
No, what they're doing, I know, what they're doing is they're actually, I don't know, they've got these things called point of care manuals. So if I go to a hospital and I need treatment, the nurse can look up a manual about step 1, 2, 3 about how to treat me for a cut on my hand. And what they're saying is, well, that treatment that I get in the hospital, which is usually pretty high standard, I want to get that. I want to be able to assure everyone that even in the most rural area, you'll get the same treatment, the same quality of care. So these people have to hit the same point of care manual, that consistency. So what we had to do is come up with to investigate whether this was so that was their question for me, and I said, okay, well, let's do it like that, and we did the survey. I don't think there was that much difference, and I actually said, well, if I was you, there are a couple of little tweaks, but they can see all this. The one thing that they could see the procedure, but then there was videos that went with it, and I asked them what was the how vital was it for the video. It wasn't vital, so I was able to say, look, no, you can use this. And they're going on, there's a further development. I mean, that's not the solution, but there's another development going on around that. And because this group is doing it, other groups are now doing it, and we're getting more and more data about what's going on, and we'll be able to just build up the numbers. I mean, at the moment, 155 is not, it's not good, but it indicates. The pleasing thing was, though, what it indicates is that the hospital board had confidence in the institution of our quality processes, that they could say, oh, this institution does it well. That's what was the pleasing thing, because we've been systematic about how we've done it. Okay, that was I finished on that last slide, and what I really need to now focus on is this organisational. So the last slides were all about the individual. Now this is about the organisational one, the return on investment, the application, the impact. And really this came from the United States Defence Department, and they did this training content, 2 days of classroom training compared with a blended learning environment. They did the cost per learner, and they came down here and they got an increase in value of $7 million. You can see where this led to, that the whole American Defence Department is a really big player in e-learning because the figures stacked up for them. So, yes, US dollars, yes. It comes from the thing. So, you've got to ask yourself though, how did they get these figures? You know, how did they justify these figures? If you come back to what I've been trying to say to you all day, is you look for standards. You look for standard ways to measure these things. And the standard way to measure these things is here. This is called the Return on Investment Calculator. It's developed by the Australian Flexible Learning Framework. And it says, okay, how many trainees do you want to train? And I'm going to put 100. How many in the class? 20. Training locations, 5. So let's hourly rate dollars and ongoing costs. So you can see how you can change this. And what that does is puts it into figures here. That is what it's going to cost you. If I change this figure, you see the figures start to change. So you can see I can identify what the training cost is. That's the $100 is the training per unit. So it can show you what the costs are going to be on a year. And it goes through for the totals. This was developed by the Commonwealth of Australia, and the next figures to them are the e-learning figures. So what you do is you've identified the key costs of delivering training, the standard costs of delivering training, identify the standard costs, use the calculations to find out, and then you can make an informed decision whether this is worthwhile doing it for you, whether this particular course is worthwhile or not. It gives you some break-even figures about when you are going, the more people you have, the less people, the number of group sizes, it will start to tell you what is the most benefit for you. It starts to give you those indications of all that. And it gives you it over a 3-year period. In general, upfront costs for e-learning are very high, and the initial profits are small, break even or small. After though, if you start to notice, after the first initial costs are taken from it, the secondary costs start to get bigger and bigger. That's where you start to make your money. Upfront costs always more, start to reduce as you go through. Right, so put them all together. We've gone through this impact, application, accomplishment and satisfaction, and that's what the return on investment is, and that's the final thing. The final thing that you need to do is, where does your institution fit? Are you measuring both individual and organisational impacts? Are you doing that? What is your institution to prepare for supporting or enhancing capability amongst learners and employers? And are there opportunities for collaboration that could increase your institution's capability and impact? So you've got to ask yourself these questions. Given that the investment in e-learning can be quite high, you've got to look at ways to be efficient and effective with it. Any questions on those ones? That's the end of... That was just to wrap that quality counts one.
It looks like from the figure you gave that
Yep.
you spend less money when you use e-learning rather than traditional learning, right?
Depends. Obviously, the more interactive you become, the higher the cost. So as soon as I start doing multimedia interactions cost more to develop, therefore there's more front-end loading, therefore costs come down. So the less multimedia, and it's a matter of balancing that. It's a balancing act. So you might say, oh, what we've got to have is only 5% of multimedia in the first year, and then we'll increase that to 20% in year 3. Rather than trying to get 20% in year 1, you've got to actually be systematic about it. And everyone's got, the big thing about this is if everyone understands the logic behind what you're doing, they will accept the costs, because it's got to be logically done. You can't, as soon as I know I'm going to run the institution break from developing my geography course that I really want to do, and it's going to cost them $150,000 for 20 students, it's going to run the institution broke. You know what I mean? I'm going to go, oh, yeah, okay, let's be realistic. But I really want plate teutonics, the movement of plates to be animated, and only one. So you get the person to choose the right thing, so it comes.
Another question, in terms of learning outcomes,
Yep.
how do you measure? That one is more on that cost. Learning outcomes, how do we measure, how to justify? Because people were saying, we use traditional methods, you see, this is the learning outcome. You use e-learning, can you tell me what will be the learning?
Yep.
Is it going to be improved or what? So how do you, actually we cannot do it, because to me, it's a process. Learning is something that you cannot measure like a product, right? Instantly. It's
Yeah.
kind of yeah.
There are two ways to answer that question, and I agree. In the big scheme of things in the lifelong learning, it is difficult to justify. But we're finding that right now that the biggest impact is in industry, and industry don't care about learning. They don't.
They don't care about performance.
They just care about performance. Am I training this person? Do I get more money from the training? Are they more productive? Have I got more? Do they create more? That's what they want to do.
Yeah.
And they can quite easily do that. They go, we've invested this, our production was this, it's now this. Oh, brilliant. Do more of that. Oh, it costs us money, we didn't get, no, not going to do it. See you later. I mean, that's what they do. Very real simple answer. So, what I'm going to finish up on is something that's really, and I sort of alluded to it in the last slide, that collaboration. You've got to start thinking about how you can be smarter with this. So, give you some little e hao tia mea nui o tia o he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, which actually means what is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. And that is the most important thing in your organisation, or any organisation, who's the people that work within it. So, if I showed you this, and it might not be quite as impactful on this audience, but if I showed you this, and if you were a Christian audience, there are two things that you will look at on this. One is apple. But if you're in a Christian audience, biting of an apple, the biting of an apple, and I don't know if it's the same with you, is forbidden. Adam and Eve were told not to bite the apple. So they're told, so it was forbidden. Yet it is one of the major brands in the world. But it's actually when you look at the imagery around it. So, research has demonstrated, and I said that before about that, so what we have to look at is what are people engaging with. Obviously there's the teaching, there's the pedagogy behind everything. Really important. There are the systems that we use, and how does that pedagogy inform the design of the system. Quite often what we've been given, oh, here's a learning management system. You've got your online learning now. Deal with it. Whoa, what? What we should be saying is we want this type of pedagogy by this type of learning management system. So we've got to get the pedagogy driving the system not driving the other way. And obviously we've got content. Even though I've said that it's all about facilitation, etc., we do know that disciplines contain content knowledge. There's no doubt about that. There is content knowledge in every single discipline that people engage with. But level 1 students don't have to engage with nuclear physics. They have to involve themselves with the basic fundamentals of physics. So we've got to make sure that the content we provide to students is at the appropriate level for them to achieve what we need them to achieve. So we've got those 3 things. If you have a look at the great big picture of things, when you look at these things, you'll see the tutor. What does the tutor do? Tutor develops and deploys digital content. That's what they do. And they develop and deploy evaluation instruments. Evaluation either of the material itself or evaluation of the course. What does the student do? The student engages with this content and completes the evaluation forms. And then we have feedback, modification, reuse for others, and data class, and we've got the data in class levels, institutional levels and international levels. We can have them like that, so we can have them on the class sizes, feedback of students in one class, feedback of all the students in the program, feedback of the institution, feedback of your institution compared with a similar institution, so we can make this data available. So that's what we can sort of look at. And then you have a look at what the student actually, what it looks like for a student. So a student enters and they've got an integrated systems and learning environment. So they've got email, blogs, student records, and then they've got their content, their open archive journals, course content, etc. That's what the student engages with as they come through the system. They're constantly pushing against systems and content, and they're engaged with that. Possibilities around that. But when we realise that those things happen in e-learning, what we're in educational environments, we have history of building relationships with others in our same discipline, others in the same physical location, and others with a similar cultural backgrounds. Physics teachers get on well with physics teachers. People in Kuala Lumpur will get on well with people in Kuala Lumpur. I mean, that's the way of the world. But what I want to ask you, these subject-specific, physically restrained, culturally bound relations, we may not have advanced knowledge in the ways. Because we're all thinking in the same way, we might actually create something that, although appear to be making progress, doesn't make progress at all. What we really want is collaboration. We want to build collaborative relationships with others. This is in e-learning. I'm not talking about e-learning here. Others outside our disciplines, physical locations and culture. That's what we really want to be thinking about. What we want to be thinking about is, how can we evaluate content? So, is text better? Is video better? Is audio better? What level does this work? What level does that work? What images work with your culture? What works with ours? It should be on the right, should be on... We can evaluate content jointly across countries and start thinking about that. We can evaluate the systems themselves. Does Moodle work? Doesn't it work? Is there a better one? Does Blackboard work better? You know, let's evaluate the system. Does it meet our pedagogical needs? Is there something better? Should we, you know, we can evaluate, start looking at those systems. We can evaluate perceptions. Is this the right instrument to use? Can we use a different one? How can we use this? Big thing is we use the same instruments. And I keep coming back to this word, standards. Use the same standards across. And then we can compare results. We can actually compare results. Automatically, you've got multiple research outputs. I've got a research output for myself because I did this anyway. You've got a research output if you collaborate with me because you did this anyway. Then we put the data together, we've got a joint research output. So instead of having one research output physically bound, culturally bound from me, we've got 3 research outputs using similar standards, getting similar findings. We then compare them. I mean, we're starting to expand our base of knowledge. We're contributing to the discipline. And it doesn't have to be English language learning, science learning. It has to be all about what type of content did we use for our students? Did it work? Did it not work? Did the videos work with vocational education students and not with science students? What is the reason for this? Why are we doing that? So there's a whole list of stuff that we can do. And what I'd like to think about is that the future is actually around Malaysia and New Zealand comparisons. That's where you could start thinking about where the comparisons could come from. We're a totally different culture. We're physically isolated compared to where you are. You have vast numbers of people, different perceptions, but we could actually inform each other about how these things go. So, that is the end of the day. So thank you very much for listening. Questions?
These are the areas of research collaboration.
That's the areas of research collaboration. They're potential areas of research collaboration. I think we haven't explored in e-learning. We've got the opportunity to be multidisciplinary, where we haven't had that opportunity before.
Are you suggesting that this the areas of research in e-learning, or are you suggesting the research between Waikato?
No, e-learning and in general. But with Waikato as well. I mean, we have people evaluating content, we have evaluation of, I mean, there are researchers around. It's just a matter of what we have to do. I think what we have to do is actually say, what is my passion? Because research is all about passion. Oh, I really wouldn't mind evaluating a system. Okay, now who can I link with? Oh, that guy came and talked to us, I'll give him an email. Oh, I know someone who's, you know what I mean? It's that trying to build the relationships rather than it's, you know what research is like. Research is an evolving type of discipline, isn't it?
Where do you fit in the evaluation pedagogy?
Where do I fit in? I've done all of those at different stages. My current interest really is around e-learning in industry. How we can transfer the knowledge we've got in educational institutions to affect industrial performance, like the health sector and Genesis Energy. So but you still got to do these same 3 things. I mean, these are common sort of areas. Okay. Any questions? Any other questions? If not, there is going to be a photo opportunity, I'm told. Is that? No?
What was your view on the IT system, the current IT system that we have now, the blackboard system, the Moodle, the whatever you have? What's your view? Is there any, are they adequate, you know, as far as the technology is concerned, the current technology is concerned, or there are a lot of there are a lot of areas of improvement, you know, needed compared to the pedagogy is needed. Is the IT currently can support that or is lack?
Yeah. Moodle at the moment is a content management system that favours, in reality, and this is just a general statement, asynchronous learning. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't actually engage in that synchronous live video conferencing, for example. It doesn't do videos very well. It allows you to download videos, but it stores them in its Moodle system. And the storage of the video files in the Moodle system creates a whole lot of complexities and processing power issues as soon as you do it. So you actually say, well, whoa, how can I overcome this? And it was like what I was talking about before. So what you then do is you then start thinking, oh, what ideally should a learning environment look like? Ideally, a learning environment system should mimic what a student uses. So Moodle, if it is Moodle, should have email. Moodle is a LMS, so it does that bit. It should have a web folio. If you notice, I put Exebis, which is a Moodle block. So it's starting. So Moodle plus doing this. It should have blogs. Yes, it does. It should have student records. No, it doesn't. Not that strong on student records. So what we've got to do is actually identify the systems we want to integrate within Moodle. So we then start looking at systems that we start integrating with Moodle, and I'm hoping that this will be here. Maybe it won't be. So we start to look at systems that we can integrate within Moodle. And so this is my test site called the Integrated Systems Learning Environment. And you can see I'm starting to use Microsoft Live AeU. Google will be in here as well. So I'm starting to look at, if I've got my email, why can't I log in? If I've got my Facebook account, why can't I log in? So we're starting to integrate the systems to be a seamless system. So if I'm just going to log into this system, it's not going to work, I can tell you that, but you then start to look at this, and you can see all of a sudden I've now logged myself in. This Mahara is a portfolio system, and Exebis is a portfolio system. So what I'm doing now within Moodle is I'm making Moodle actually a basis to actually do a whole lot of other activities. So then you actually say, well, what about the lecture capture? And we use Panopto lecture capture. And in Moodle here, we've got the completed recordings of all the lectures like we're doing here. So we've got the recordings of the lectures. It can come audio or video casts. And when I do the thing I like about this is we've tested this as well. This RSS feed comes out, and what it does, I don't know if you've seen Panopto, but Panopto is a multifunctional stuff. But the RSS feed, when it comes out, will allow me on my mobile device to see the content of the course. So we're starting to look at that. So, long answer to your question is Moodle is not the answer. No, it's not the answer. There will be no one answer at any given time because it will all be evolving. But what we have to do is make sure that we evolve. We can't actually sit there and go, we've got Moodle, oh, whoopee-doo, that's great. We've actually got to say, we've got Moodle, where's everyone going? What's everyone else doing? Is it mail? Is it the... And it could be that some of the things you tried don't work. Like a lot of the stuff I tried don't work. So you just go, let's try something else. Let's try this, let's test that. That works. Oh, let's now be systematic about this. And you start to become systematic. And the one big thing that's been driving me with all these, if you notice what I've been trying to do, all the things that I'm working on, work with Moodle as what I call the binder. which means that all our tutors have capabilities in Moodle. The step up from Moodle to portfolios, as long as I've got it within Moodle, is not that great. They're not as anxious. But if I suddenly went, oh, you've got to do this. For example, this was a task that was given to a group. They were said, oh, you're going to do video conferencing, Richard, and you're going to video conference to these 3 people in Japan. Richard just said, oh, no way in the world I can do that. There's no way I can do. I don't know anything about video conferencing. You've got to give me training. I can't do this. Really impossible to do. So I said, oh, is it? So what we can do then, Richard, is I can show you this. We just use Skype here. That's what went into his connection. And within minutes, is that logging it? But what we tried to do with it was actually put it within the environment he was familiar with. He's really, really happy. All of a sudden, all that idea of, I've got to learn how to do video conferencing. Oh, what do I have to do? How do I do this? It's not done. I can't do it. We just went in and did the Scopia client, used an Outlook client. He didn't know any of this. We just set it up and said to him, go to your email, schedule a meeting, copy that, put it in here. Went and did that, and he said, oh, this is wonderful. He doesn't need to know the technical stuff behind it. He doesn't want to know. You know, he just wants to click on the link and away he goes. So what we've been trying to do is get that capability come through, all of those stuff. What I do when I test, I'll just explain why I've got multiple sites here. What I do when I test is something's going to affect the database of one of the others. So I put one block in, like the live AeU block or the thing, and I go, okay, let me just make sure everything else is working. Let me test all of that, and when it works, I'll put it together, and then I'm testing something else over here, and then by putting them to, so it might work all right here, but once I put it with this one, it's going to collapse. So just trying to work the systems out. So that's why I'm jumping around here. Obviously, I use widgets, which is my Twitter feeds, RSS feeds, little movie videos in here. Another Twitter feed down here, that's a different widget. Why did I come to this course? What we've been working on is this one. So we got video and big blue button. Video is an uploading of a, now what we've done with video is we've got a system called Cultura. So this links, so you upload a video, but it doesn't load into Moodle, it actually loads into a different server. So we've got a multimedia server, so when the pressure comes on Moodle to deliver, it's coming from a separate source. So it doesn't affect the Moodle performance, it affects the, and the big blue button is also on a separate source. And this one here allows you to do, sets up a web conference, and when you, if you go to bigbluebutton.com, you'll actually see it's an online, free online web conferencing tool that integrates within Moodle. So thank you very much for your attention.